Hello there, coming to you live from the bunker. This is episode 41 of Watchtower in Focus, the show that zooms in on all things JW, bringing the governing body and its teachings and policies under microscopic scrutiny. IICSA, the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse for England and Wales, has taken a surprising twist as documents emerge revealing Watchtower's anger at a series of questions put to headquarters spokesperson Paul Gillies by inquiry panellist Ivor Frank concerning the potential destruction of documents. And it's personal for yours truly, as I am named in Watchtower correspondence as a perpetrator of hate speech that should have been thrown off the inquiry as a core participant. Joining me to discuss this bizarre turn of events is my panel. We have Javier Ortiz, we have Mark O'Donnell, and we have Kim Silvio swigging coffee, as she has every right to, due to the unearthly hour that she's broadcasting from in Australia.
Hey, everybody. Good to be on.
Good to see you, Lloyd. Hey, Kim. Hey, Javier.
So, yes, we are joined by, it seems, 200 plus. That number's rising as I speak. Just so much to go over. Where do we even begin? We obviously did our live stream on IICSA, and we mentioned, I think, Ivor Frank's comments. How could you not mention them? Because they caught everyone by surprise, not just Paul Gillies, but I think we were all surprised. Because up to that moment, Paul Gillies had been given a fairly easy ride in terms of questioning. Then out of nowhere, Ivor Frank, the word is ambushed in Watchtower correspondence. Apparently he's ambushed Paul Gillies. And then we later find out that CCJW really did not like the way things transpired. What can we say?
Well, it all happened very quickly. I think we were all very surprised while watching the IICSA hearings, as you pointed out, that at the very end, in fact, I remember mentioning in some group chats, of course, we weren't talking to you, Lloyd. You were very occupied with being a core participant. But among my other friends, you know, I said, hey, this is really, they're throwing softball questions. They're throwing easy questions. They're really not hitting Paul Gillies with any super hard questions that he needs to answer. So then at the very end, this Mr. Ivor Frank comes in and starts questioning him about whether he knows about records management. Now that's significant because a couple of years ago, there were some videos that were leaked that apparently were quite sensitive to Watchtower because they were training videos where the records management department, which is just two guys, by the way, Watchtower's records management, Sean Bartlett and another assistant, were going around to branches all over the world and teaching branches how to maintain records management and also records destruction. And so, of course, that sounds controversial in itself. Now, if we're talking about just normal everyday records, real estate and so forth, no big deal. You know, they have a right to get rid of certain documents after a period of time. But what was really critical about the one video in particular that was leaked was the fact that Sean Bartlett, while giving a seminar in England, at the London branch, I believe, actually said that the branch has authorized me to tell this story about how years ago we got involved in some litigation, meaning the Watchtower, and that the people involved in this came to Watchtower's offices and they were looking for some shred of evidence that Watchtower had been connected to this other person, this other company that was involved in the litigation. He was very vague about it, didn't say who the company was, But he said that a man, one of the witnesses at headquarters, everyone else had said, no, we don't have any connection to this company. Well, a man pulled out a handwritten note from his desk and said, oh, yes, we had dealings with this company.
Well, we're going to see that clip later.
Yeah.
We have the clip all lined up. But yeah,
and
it was
Sean Bartlett,
incriminating, wasn't it? It was
very
incriminating footage.
Yeah, because the conclusion to that, and we'll talk about this, but the conclusion to that he said was basically, hey, he was presuming to say that if you don't get rid of these handwritten notes, then we could be liable, as in that case, I won't get into the amount, but Watchtower could be liable. So all of that was very controversial. And then at the end of the IICSA hearings, that information was, Mr. Frank was questioned. He's a board member for IICSA, and he was questioned about, do you know Sean Bartlett, and do you know about records management? And so one thing led to another. And so here we have Watchtower saying, how dare you throw us this curveball?
That was when it went from.
We're going to go into the documents. I have them lined up.
We're just running ahead here. It's an exciting topic because we're going to find out that Lloyd, you and myself and Jason Wynn were mentioned by Watchtower in this document as if we had been feeding information to Mr. Frank. And for the record, I honestly didn't do my homework. I didn't even know who this man was. I knew about IICSA and been researching a little bit about it, but Ivor Frank, I didn't know he was a panel member. And here Watchtower is questioning whether or not we had been secretly feeding information and records management documents and videos to a panel board member, and Watchtower's crying foul over that.
I can reveal that Javier is really, really annoyed that his name wasn't mentioned in the letter. Javier, have you calmed down yet?
I am, and I must admit, I am the one who fed him the information. No, I'm kidding. No, but that was the point in the questioning where it went from softballs to sledgehammers, right? Like you could see in the expression on his face, it was like, oh, where did this come from? And so the fact that they've responded to this somehow shows that it touched the nerve, and that's whenever you can poke the dragon, that's awesome. So,
indeed.
Are you getting feedback on
Kim, you are a retired lawyer. It's a little bit patchy, your audio, but hopefully that will resolve itself. Kim, you're a retired lawyer. You've had a chance to go over these documents. Again, we're going to skim through them very shortly. What do you make of the intellect and prowess of CCJW's legal department?
I just think that, as I've always said with regards to the legal branch and Watchtower, that they are very, very narrow-minded. They only see it their way. They don't actually look at the way the law actually specifies. And it's very evident, you'll see later on in the letters, that, they're focused on the fact that it was, it was procedurally unfair. But time and time again, IICSA continually tell them what actually happened, but Watchtower continually see it only in very, very narrow scope and just their way. So it's I was actually very surprised when I read all of the documents. I thought, read it properly, have a look and see what the actual point of law is, not what you want it to be.
And we have, I think, one of said documents in front of us now. And let me just double check. Okay, let me just double check it's showing properly. Yes, it is. Okay, so I'm going to go to the beginning of the document. So this is the first letter in the chain, dated 13th of August 2020, from Christian Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses. All of these documents that we're about to see are available for download on the IICSA website, and I will be making links available after the live stream has ended. I love the fact that the letter begins by saying, "This is an important letter." Okay, so we can just disregard all of your
all
other
the
letters.
others.
Oh,
Yeah.
good grief.
This is the one you want to put an asterisk on. This
Yeah.
is important, not the others.
And I've
It
highlighted.
seems so juvenile.
It does. It's like a first grader has written it. And then we scroll down, and I've highlighted a few parts. Look at this. At the conclusion of the live stream, video testimony of Paul Gillies on 11th of August 2020, panel member Mr. Ivor Frank proceeded to ask Mr. Gillies a series of questions on a records management seminar that was said to have occurred in 2017. Said to have occurred. It did occur in 2017. In his questions, Mr. Frank alleged that at that 2017 seminar, there's a little bit of background noise, by the way, so if you guys could mute for now. Mr. Frank alleged that at that 2017 seminar, elders in England were counselled to get rid of documents, and that the reason for getting rid of documents was because Satan was coming after you, Satan in the form of a legal process. Now, I've covered this on my hate speech video on my channel. We're going to see Ivor Frank's comments, and you are going to see, viewers, if you've not seen already, Ivor Frank does not allege anything. He doesn't allege anything. All he does is ask some questions. And the writers of this letter are literally putting words in Ivor Frank's mouth and saying, he alleged this, he alleged that. Mr. Frank referred twice to a gentleman named Sean Bartlett as the person that he alleged had advised elders to destroy the records. Again, he wasn't alleging anything, he was asking questions. There is a very prejudicial implication to Mr. Frank's grave allegation, certainly as understood by anyone viewing the live stream video transmission. The Britain branch office of Jehovah's Witnesses had been counselled to destroy records pertaining to allegations of child sexual abuse. In effect, Mr. Frank implied that Mr. Bartlett had counselled a criminal offence. Again, we're going to watch the footage. You are not going to see Mr. Frank make any such implication. Then you have, I've highlighted there the number of times the word allegation is used in that paragraph alone. And then we have the words ambush and humiliate. Regrettably, Mr. Frank chose to ambush Mr. Gillies with this grave and far-reaching allegation of a criminal offence, knowing that without advance notice, Mr. Gillies may not be in a position to provide accurate information to the inquiry in response to Mr. Frank's allegation. The fact that no advance notice whatsoever was given of the allegation and the manner in which Mr. Frank made his allegation strongly suggests or leaves the impression that Mr. Frank's live stream video allegation was designed for public consumption to humiliate Mr. Gillies, Mr. Bartlett, the Britain branch office, and elders of Jehovah's Witnesses by implying that each of them has committed a very serious crime. Big words, strong language. I love this here as well. We are anxious to bottom this out and to contain the damage that has been done. Then they ask, I realize I'm talking a lot, but I just want to kind of breeze through the letter and then we can talk about it. Then we have the 4 requests. We ask that the inquiry provide us by close of business on 14th of August 2020, in other words, tomorrow, with answers to the following, along with any and all supporting documents or other information. We want to know how Mr. Frank got hold of the information, give us names, give us details, give us electronic links and copies. It really is astonishing. And then they quote a tweet. A lot of their paranoia revolves around a tweet that Jason Wynn tweeted, in which he said, Gillies, you are caught. You can thank Mark O'Donnell, Cedars JW Survey, and Jason Wynn for giving IICSA Sean Bartlett on a plate. And then it says, as you are aware, Lloyd Evans has testified during the public hearing that he is the founder and senior editor of jwsurvey.org. I'm scratching my head. I still haven't figured out what relevance that has to the Ivor Frank questions. And then at the end, in the meantime, in order to contain the irreparable damage and harm to both Mr. Gillies and Jehovah's Witnesses, please ensure that video footage of any of the exchange between Mr. Frank and Mr. Gillies not be disseminated more widely than it already has, and that there is no other further dissemination of that exchange. In other words, take down your live stream or edit the live stream so that Ivor Frank's questions don't appear. Those were my highlights of this document.
Lloyd, could you scroll back up just a little bit to the page 3, the end of page 3? Yeah, that's perfect. And you mentioned that it seems some of their paranoia revolves around this text from Jason Wynn. And the tweet from Jason Wynn. And that's interesting because his tweet said something along the lines of, thanks to Lloyd and, Mark for serving up Sean Bartlett on a platter. And it almost seems to imply, or it almost seems to make me think that Watchtower thinks that, we're trying to take some kind of credit for these leaked videos. And for the record, these videos are leaked from some anonymous source inside Watchtower. We don't know the names or identities of, whoever leaked this information. But as reporters of Jehovah's Witness matters, such as yourself, Lloyd, you've been reporting for years and you've founded the website JW Survey. And I've written articles many times for Survey regarding child sexual abuse. And Mr. Jason Wynn, of course, he originally founded the whistleblowing site Avoid JW, and he still continues to be an advocate for CSA victims. So, you've got people that are reporting on these matters. It doesn't mean that they are the culprits, the leakers. We're not inside the organization any longer. We're outside of it reporting on these things. So it seems they're very angry about having these comments being made about Sean Bartlett. But this is routine investigative type reporting where something is leaked. We comment on it. We're not responsible for the leak, but we are permitted as reporters or journalists, whatever you want to call us, bloggers, to report on these things. So, I wouldn't say they were angry. I'd say they're recalcitrant.
Yeah.
And just so you know, Mark owes me $5 every time I'm able to successfully use that word on Watchtower Focus.
Yeah. You and Covert Fade.
I just wanted to point out a couple of things about the letter, if I can, Lloyd and Boyce. I particularly noted the language that was used in the letter. And I just wanted to point out that live stream is mentioned 10 times. Allegations is mentioned 24 times. 4 of those being serious allegations, 1 being a false allegation, 4 being a very serious allegation. Criminal offence mentioned 3 times. Advance notice mentioned 5 times. Damages mentioned 6 times. And Lloyd, you were mentioned twice. And if I could trouble you, Lloyd, to roll back up, Danny, to roll back up to the top of the letter. Yeah. In the first paragraph, for me, I understand, your interest in it. For me, the interest is in the second after this is a very important letter because the others weren't. They're looking at procedural fairness there. One thing that I really noticed with Paul Gillies that actually made me a little bit unsettled when he was giving his evidence was how polished his answers seemed to be. And he was almost ready to answer the question before he actually had made before they finished asking the question. And for me, I looked and thought, wow, you've really been prepped on this and you've really been polished in terms of what you're going to say. I think my interpretation of what their major problem with Ivor Frank's question is a question of procedural fairness. And in the first paragraph, it says the procedural fairness, well, actually I won't read it because it's a bit boring, but what they're saying is that it's a procedural fairness issue. And my opinion is that it's not a matter for procedural fairness. Mr. Frank's question arose following evidence given by Mr. Gillies regarding his own evidence, which was a witness statement in the case of PRA 5, where he stated that prior to 31 August 1990, there was no filed documents stating whether or not Peter Stewart, who was the offender in that case, had been appointed or deleted as a minister or servant. CCJW provided correspondence to the Inquirer confirming in their letter on the 13th of 8, which is on page 2, to the inquiry confirming that that information had been submitted. So I think what Watchtower really missed in this particular equation is the fact that their argument is we weren't given notice, we should have been given notice. It's a requirement of the IICSA inquiry to give notice. You didn't give us notice. And on that basis, it was procedurally unfair. And then they proceed to then move on to all of the problems with it. And I think there's a really big tell in the letter that the fact that they've mentioned the live stream 10 times is a clear indication that they're not so upset about the fact that Mr. Frank asked the question. It's about what damage it's going to do.
Well, Kim, do you think that this is, legally speaking, as former attorney, do you think that they're trying to apply criminal and civil rules of law to this inquiry, meaning that when you have an exhibit, you can't just spring an exhibit on the defense or either side can't just spring an exhibit. The judge, both sides have to see this ahead of time. So it almost seems like they're making the argument, you can't ask questions because that's effectively like, a piece of evidence that has to be submitted in advance, and we have to be prepared for that.
Absolutely. And I think that's exactly the point that they're trying to make. But what they're failing to acknowledge, and I'm not saying they don't know, they definitely know, what they're failing to acknowledge is the fact that through Mr. Gillies' evidence, and it's referenced in the documents, we might see it a bit later, it's actually referenced in the documents that they acknowledge that line of questioning was made, and that whilst it wasn't specifically about that video, there were lots of questions about records management. There were lots of questions about, how documents are handled. And that is a core part of what IICSA are wanting to look at, is how everything is managed. And so at the end of the day, it's a direct question from evidence that was provided. You can't give notice on evidence that comes as part of the investigation or through the hearing, so to speak. They're missing the key point that this was from their own evidence that Mr. Frank then made inquiries and then pursued the question. And he's entitled to ask questions, as was quite rightly pointed out by the IICSA chair.
And we have the follow-up because IICSA had been ordered to reply by the very next day, close of business, and it seems they duly did. So Simon, the letter is to Simon Ochono, legal department, and there's the explanation. Conscious of the inquiry's previous correspondence with the CCJW on the question of document retention and the reassurances that the CCJW had given in relation to preservation of documentation, Mr. Frank undertook his own internet research outside the hearing. In doing so, he came across an article in the Philadelphia Inquirer entitled Watch Jehovah's Witness Official Says to Destroy Documents Because Satan is Coming After Us. No one brought this article to Mr. Frank's attention. He found it through his own background research of open sources available to everyone. Mr. Frank is entitled to ask a witness questions. He is, however, sorry to hear that the question came as a surprise to Mr. Gillies and apologises for this. The transcript, this is in response to Watchtower's demand that the video be taken down. The transcript and video recording of proceedings stands as the public record of what happened in the inquiry's hearing. The inquiry does not agree to edit or remove these from its website, as doing so would distort the public record and fail to comply with the obligation contained in Section 18. However, to assist in ensuring that a fair picture of Mr. Gillies' evidence is presented, it will, of course, publish any response he gives to the questions that Mr. Frank asked alongside the video and transcript of the relevant day's proceedings. It would also be willing to adduce in evidence any witness statement that Mr. Sean Bartlett also wishes to provide. We will allow Sean Bartlett, who as far as we know isn't even English or British, we will allow him to have his say. Accordingly, please treat this letter as a formal request under Rule 9 of the Inquiry Rules 2006 for Mr. Gillies to provide a further witness statement addressing the questions posed by Mr. Frank within 14 days. I love the fact that they turn around Watchtower's interrogatory attitude in their initial letter, where they're basically playing judicial committee on IICSA, and they're saying, you answer our questions and you come back to us by a certain time. It feels as though IICSA is here reminding them who's in charge and reminding them that they actually now need to come back with answers.
I think they've forgotten that this is an investigation
Yeah.
of religious organizations for which Jehovah's Witnesses are, have notoriously been in the press and in civil and criminal cases for their mismanagement of child sexual abuse allegations. So it might be good that they kind of shut up about it and listen and try to cooperate with the investigation.
Indeed. Let's move on. Sorry, go on, Kim.
Sorry, Lloyd. My point was just brought out in that that response to IICSA. It's on page 2.
Oh, is it not showing on the screen?
First paragraph.
Right, you've still got. Sorry about that.
I've got,
I was going to tell you.
I've got the.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought it was showing.
We've
on
still
the
got
screen.
the letter from the 13th, I think,
That's
on the screen.
bizarre. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, no, I think it did come up, but then it went away. I'm not sure.
I think I know what the problem is. Bear with me one moment. Just to. This is why I need a producer. Okay, let me take
Can
this
we
down.
call him Danny?
Let me. Yeah, that's an inside IICSA joke.
Danny.
Danny. 000.
Share screen. Just to
We
show
should
that I'm
use
not
those
making
differences.
any of this
Yeah.
up. Chrome tab.
Yeah, I can pull some of these up for you if you like, Lloyd.
Let me just see if I can. Here we are. I should probably just have the application window open. There we go. I had the tab open and not the application. So there we go. That was the letter I was reading from.
Yeah, so just up there, it's the first full sentence on that page. And they really harp on about the fact that, in Watchtower's letter, they wanted an apology and they've been hard done by and we're the victims and poor me. And they've later on, we accept your apology, etc. And they then use that, they clutch onto that to then demonstrate further their grievance. But they also, I don't think they've interpreted this paragraph either correctly. It says the inquiry accepts Mr. Gillies had no prior notice, blah, 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 and apologises the procedural failing in that respect. Fair enough. That he didn't get notice, that's a fact. And then the point after that is the matter arose during the course of evidence in the sense that Mr. Gillies gave evidence on both 10 and 11 and it arised from it. So they're not acknowledging that particular point. And as we discussed previously, Mr. Frank is entitled to ask questions. And then, the last bit, and I found that was he's very sorry to hear that the question came as a surprise to Mr. Gillies and apologises for that. Apologised for the fact that he was surprised, not for anything else. So yeah, I think that's particularly relevant also.
It's just politeness, isn't it? So then we move on to Watchtower's response. They were not happy, but they didn't say this is an important letter, so that's at least something. We note, this was actually this was golden. I hope Richard Scorer's watching, because I know he watches some videos. We note the inquiry's apology for not giving either Mr. Gillies or CCJW prior notice of the subject matter upon which Mr. Frank questioned Mr. Gillies, and thank you for it. However, this procedural failing directly created a situation which potentially damaged the reputations of Mr. Gillies, CCJW, and Mr. Bartlett. In this connection, in his closing live-streamed statement, Mr. Scorer referred to Mr. Frank's questioning and implied that the inquiry had uncovered destruction of child abuse documents by CCJW, and this lie is likely to proliferate. Accordingly, please confirm that the inquiry and or Mr. Frank will make its apology public in the same way that the questioning of Mr. Gillies was conducted publicly. If not, we would be grateful if you would explain why. let's just back up and see what my lawyer, Richard Scorer, who is a leading abuse lawyer in the UK. He's the vice president of the National Secular Society. Very, very well respected legal professional who checks his words carefully, chooses his words carefully, I should say. Mr. Scorer referred to Mr. Frank's questioning and implied that the inquiry had uncovered destruction of child abuse documents by CCJW. Here is a screen grab of the transcript of this exact moment where Richard Scorer mentions the questioning. And this is all Richard said. Mr. Gillies was also very discomforted quite clearly by Mr. Frank's questions about document destruction. That is literally all Richard said about the matter. And yet when CCJW are writing about it, they characterize this as a lie, as Richard lying about evidence being uncovered of document destruction. This was absolutely remarkable.
And again, they're just clearly not acknowledging the fact that they're just blind. And this is why I was saying that they're very narrow focused. They were just blind to what the IICSA was actually saying to them. Watchtower have an idea in their head. It's a procedural issue. It's a procedural fairness issue. You know, we've been hurt. We've been upset. We've been affected. And now they're just substantiating that claim by saying, you know, that I read that Mr. Scorer's what he actually did say, and what they have gleaned and what he said are just completely different universes. They're not anything like each other, and that's where I sort of get very, very irritated and frustrated with them, because they're not looking at the core issue. They just want to see it the way they want to see it. They say that, you know, there's been a procedural fairness. He shouldn't have been allowed to ask the question. And IICSA have actually already answered this question twice in their previous correspondence, that, you know, the questioning came from Mr. Gillies' evidence. It's absolutely ridiculous. And Mr. Gillies answers questions about document management in his evidence about how the organisation handles documents. So I just don't understand how they cannot see the point that IICSA are making. And I just wanted to point out, oh no, that's the next one. That's fine. That's all.
No, I appreciate you. Sorry, go on, Javier.
No, so their argument pretty much boils down to, we didn't like the questions that we were asked, and it's unfair.
We weren't told about it before, so we didn't have a chance to polish our answers, and also to potentially lodge an objection with IICSA that this shouldn't be brought into it, because we don't see that it's in the scope of what IICSA has the right to inquire. We told them, and I think we'll see this a little bit later, we told them in previous submissions that we made to IICSA, I think it's Court Rule 9, we told them what our statistics were in relation to child sexual abuse. We told them that we were doing a records management review that had nothing to do with child sexual abuse. You should have just accepted us at our word that that's the end of the subject. We've told you how it is, accept it. Otherwise, it's procedural unfairness, which is what they just cannot see. The reality of the matter is that it's relevant to the inquiry. It's relevant because he provided evidence. It's relevant because they asked questions about records management, which he answered. It's purely because he doesn't like the fact that he couldn't polish his answer or make an application to have that evidence excluded because it's damaging to them. So whatever it suits their rhetoric and whatever it benefits them or makes them look good, and there's countless examples where they do this, and I'm more than happy to sit here for 3 days and explain them. But you know, where they can make it look like Watchtower are exemplary, Watchtower are victims, you know, that Watchtower went above and beyond, that Watchtower were the only organisation that, you know, where they can do those sorts of things, they will do them. And his answers were mad polished. I'm sure Mr. Scorer would agree with me. They were extremely polished. and he had a list of in his head of all of the points that he was going to make. But with this one, he was obviously caught off guard. So now all of a sudden they, have lost control. So they're going to try and take back the control and focus on the simple fact that they weren't told, but they don't need to be told. And that's what's annoying me. They're not acknowledging that they weren't required to be told.
I think it's very important to point out that Mr. Frank is asking a very fair question. So here we have an investigation into Jehovah's Witnesses, and we have these leaked videos that do discuss destruction of documents. They do not discuss child sexual abuse, but the fact that they suggest that they may destroy documents or handwritten notes in order to avoid legal liability, that's fair to ask the question, hey, is this real? So Mr. Frank, essentially he's gone apparently to the Philadelphia Inquirer. He's seen the video and he's seen a report. He doesn't know that this is authentic. Okay, he's relying upon the Philadelphia Inquirer. So it is a fair question to go right to the source. This is his one opportunity to go to Sean Bartlett and say, look, is there a record? Paul Gillies.
Yeah.
Is there a records management department? Is this real? And, are the videos authentic? Were you there? He's trying to establish truth because before he can assess whether or not what's in the video is authentic, he would like to ask Paul Gillies if he was there for that video. Is it true? And by the way, during that video, I just printed this out. This is a screen grab of the certificate of destruction. So this is a document, and we could pull this up later if we want to. But in one of the videos that Sean Bartlett trains records management to these different branches, and they've gone to South Africa and UK and other countries. He even says they're going to go to dozens and dozens of countries to do this training. But he points out the fact that when they document specific items to be destroyed, they do not itemize which items are going to be destroyed. What they do is they itemize bundles of documents that are going to be destroyed, and they put them on this. So that is something significant, because if there were child sexual abuse documents that were very specific, they would not be enumerated on this. It would just say that we have, in the legal department, as an example, destroyed a bundle of documents and we've recorded that we destroyed it. It's another way of avoiding possible legal liability, because, as Sean Bartlett likes to say, Satan is coming after us in the form of legal. So I think the bottom line is it's a fair question that was asked by Mr. Frank.
What's interesting, though,
and also,
sorry, go on, Kim.
I was just going to say, and also on that note, the other reason why it's important or interesting to Mr. Frank is because they've provided information, they've provided statistics to the inquiry. If he had any ounce of concern regarding what he had found, he has the right to ask the question to make an analysis basis or a judgment basis in his mind as to whether or not there could be or potentially may be an issue with regards to the information or the evidence he's allowed to test the evidence to see whether or not there should be further inquiries made. He just asked a very simple question just to try and get to the preliminary stages. In my opinion, I don't know, I don't even know the man, but that's how I would see that he would be doing some initial testing of the evidence to see whether or not there's a need to go any further. That's, as far as I'm concerned, that's perfectly acceptable.
What's interesting, though, is that we start off with 4 questions in Watchtower's first letter, 4 questions, then become 5. It says there, further, your letter has raised other important questions. Accordingly, please respond to the following questions. I love this one. What is the date of the article? I mean, come on. That's the sort of question where you're well within your rights to say, Google is your friend. Do your own Googling. So they fire a bunch of other questions at IICSA, and then they say, kindly provide your response by close of business on Thursday, the 20th, August 20th, and you'll see there it's August 19th. So they're still ordering IICSA around as though they're children or as though they're in front of a judicial committee. Then you have IICSA's response, which understandably says, I answered several of the questions that you raise in my letter dated 14th of August 2020. No one brought the article in the Philadelphia Inquirer to Mr. Frank's attention. He found it through his own research, prompted by his reading a disclosed document and seeing that Mr. Gillies had given evidence in relation to PRA 5, from whom the inquiry also heard evidence on 10th of August. The inquiry will give consideration, and this is key, the inquiry will give consideration to publishing this correspondence, including my letter dated 14th of August 2020, once the statement and exhibit I have requested are provided and the evidential picture is complete. This is key as far as I'm concerned, because CCJW is here being put on notice that this entire exchange of correspondence may likely end up on the public record as a demonstration of fairness.
Backfire.
So they need to be careful as to what they refer to in their next letter, because that could end up going on the public record. And it's in the next letter, the August 28th letter, that yours truly pops up with an accusation of hate speech.
And by the way, Lloyd, just to be clear, so you didn't know that you had been, so here we are in August, you've given testimony. You didn't know at that point, up until just this past week, that you had been accused of hate speech. Is that correct?
I literally knew about it, 2 or 3 days ago?
All right. Yeah, I just want that to be, clear to the minds of everyone watching, that you have done all of this research and, pretty much dropped everything you were doing except your routine videos to work on this for months on end, and had no idea that behind the scenes, Watchtower was just inciting this, was attacking you in the way that they like to do, and to get you disbarred effectively from, disqualified.
Disassociated.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
certainly disqualified.
my question is for you, Lloyd. I mean, now, you guys now understand that all this stuff was happening behind the scenes. What does it feel like to unravel all of this now?
It still feels like a massive compliment, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, as an activist, you want to be being noticed. You want to be getting the attention of the public. You want to be getting the attention of Jehovah's Witnesses and reaching out to Jehovah's Witnesses. And you actually do want to be getting the attention of the leadership. And so to know that the work that we're doing and the work that I'm doing is getting under Watchtower's skin to the point where they can be watching what I'm doing so closely and resorting to such underhanded tactics to get me thrown off the inquiry is actually a massive compliment.
I agree 100%.
I just need to thank some super chats which have been streaming through. Some very, very generous ones. Thank you to Rianne. Sorry. Your audio's broken up there, mate, unless it's just me. Yeah, I think Javier's audio might have gone. Speak to me, Javier.
Oh, there might be like a delay on my side. I'm going to drop off and reconnect. Is that cool?
Okay.
All right.
Okay, sure thing. I need to thank Kimberly Farris. Thank you so much, Kimberly, for your super sticker. That's very, very kind. We've also had super stickers through from Rianne Compier, from Shelley Cohen, from Nil Dreams 1975, from Ben B, from Becky, massive, massive super chat. Thank you, Becky. From Sylvia and from Sylvia Hernandez. So thank you to all of you for your very generous support of the channel. Obviously, this isn't the sort of video that I'm able to monetize for obvious reasons. So it basically, it's just the super chats that that pay the bills on this one. So thank you so much for sending those through.
And all the great comments, which, by the way, we know that they're probably, Paul Gillies and his team are probably watching those comments.
You never know, do you? You just never know. So let's move on to the next. Let's see here. Let's move on to the next document, which is the infamous 28th of August document in which yours truly gets mentioned. I'm just trying to keep an eye out for Javier. Mark, could you read those parts that I've highlighted so that I can keep an eye out for Javier?
All right. So the first part is application to recuse panel member Ivor Frank. And in paragraph 1, it says, to be clear, we make this application not simply to protect the legitimate interests of Christian Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, or CCJW, sufficient in itself, but also because of the diminution to the stature and integrity of the inquiry that will result from the implicit endorsement of his conduct by permitting Mr. Frank's continued involvement.
Indeed. So they're concerned about the legitimate interests of Christian congregation, which they believe to be sufficient in themselves for what they're doing here. They go on to say, in his questioning, Mr. Frank, Javier, I think you need to switch mics again. In his questioning, Mr. Frank let it be understood that during a 2017 seminar, a gentleman named Sean Bartlett had counselled a criminal offence. Again, Ivor Frank did no such thing. And that the Britain Branch Office of Jehovah's Witnesses was complicit in that offence. Again, Ivor Frank did no such thing. Indeed, as pointed out in our 13th of August letter, Mr. Frank clearly chose to ambush Mr. Gillies with this grave and far-reaching allegation of a criminal offence. Again, it just isn't reflecting reality. To those watching, unaware that Mr. Frank had sprung the questions on Mr. Gillies in disregard of inquiry procedures, Mr. Gillies' inability to supply that information might suggest evasiveness or worse. Well, there was plenty of evasiveness even without that particular exchange. Mr. Frank's live stream video allegation was designed for public consumption to humiliate Mr. Gillies. We get that same thing repeated. At this point, they're just repeating themselves from what they've already said. And then you have this bombshell, which you can imagine made me fall over, or nearly made me fall over when I read it. On 4th of February 2020, CCJW applied to the inquiry to remove Lloyd Evans as a core participant because of extreme public statements he made against Jehovah's Witnesses, which might constitute hate speech. CCJW's letter included an 8-page attachment which quoted verbatim from Mr. Evans's statements. On 7th of February 2020, the inquiry declined to revoke Mr. Evans's core participant status. So here I am in a public document that's available on IICSA's website, being publicly maligned with the accusation of hate speech by an organization that publishes homophobic vitriol and claims that everyone who isn't a follower deserves to die imminently at Armageddon. That sort of organization is accusing me of hate speech. What I don't understand is why this particular accusation that up until now was made behind my back, I don't understand what this had to do with Ivor Frank. That's what confuses me, because you get to the end of the list and it says, in view of these facts, including this thing about hate speech, CCJW's 13th of August 2020 letter to the inquiry set out a reasonable approach to contain the irreparable harm caused by Mr. What's my quote-unquote hate speech got to do with any of this?
On this.
I'll throw out my quick one and you come back, and I want to hear yours, Kim, because look, I think that, and by the way, Kim, it involves Australia too, but look, Lloyd, they're saying that Lloyd, well, they were suggesting that these tweets that happened, starting with Jason Wynn's tweet, and they're mentioning myself and Lloyd. I think at this point of the letter, they truly believe that we were communicating and feeding information to Mr. Frank, a board member of IICSA, in the same way that I was doing it with the Australian Royal Commission, communicating with Angus Stewart and sending evidence, which we've been very public about, and I've discussed publicly after it happened. And there was nothing wrong with that, because that was an investigation. Anyone could have sent information to the commission, to Angus Stewart. Certainly did not communicate with the panel or the judge, but I did communicate with Angus Stewart, I believe. And I later spoke to Watchtower's lawyer, Vincent Toole, and about the Royal Commission. He was, he vented to me, and he was pretty angry about how some things went down. And he said to me that this whole commission was fueled by apostates that were giving them information, fueling, these apostate lies about the way we, handle child sexual abuse. Given that what happened in 2015 and the fact that then Jeffrey Jackson got put on the hot seat, it's very similar to how Paul Gillies was put on the hot seat. I think Watchtower is just overly sensitive, and Paul, if you're watching, tell me if I'm wrong. But I think they truly believe this conspiracy that we were feeding this information to Mr. Frank and maybe others. And this is why they've included you in this list, saying basically Lloyd's a hate speech guy. He's saying all these things about Watchtower, and then he's the guy that's feeding this information to Mr. Frank and the panel. So therefore, we're going to ask that Mr. Frank be recused or excluded from this because he's been in communication with Lloyd Evans. I think that's what they were thinking.
That could be it.
I think you're on.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is my audio
Your audio's
okay,
fine, Javier.
Okay. No, Kim, go ahead. I thought you were gonna say something.
Well, let's all give our theories.
Okay.
Kim,
well,
Kim, you give your theory.
No, go, Javier.
Okay. Well, I think throughout the testimony, Paul Gillies' testimony, he was getting a lot of softballs, but there was nothing redeeming about his testimony. There was nothing about his testimony that would put the organization in any kind of good light. So I think what they've resorted to now is to attack the credibility of the inquiry itself and the people who composed a part of it. So yourself and your attorneys and Frank, Ivor, all those guys. That's all they have left. They've answered the questions. It's public record. The video is out there. People can watch and judge for themselves. So the only thing that they can salvage, maybe a small victory, would be to get this guy recused, so that they can claim, hey, look, there was some shady stuff going on behind the scenes. It was biased. It was discriminatory, and the evidence of this is that we were able to get this guy off of the inquiry. That's what I think, and that's that's like the tactic. And I'm not an attorney, Kim, you can tell me, but that seems to me like a tactic from an attorney who doesn't have a shot at winning a case. And this is not what this is. This isn't a case or a trial, and there's not going to be a verdict at the end and sentences and all that stuff. This is an inquiry, but they're treating it like they're on trial, which to the public they are. But they're going to these last resorts to try to score some points, and it's honestly it's embarrassing. Like. Yeah. I'm embarrassed for them. So
I wholeheartedly actually agree with you, Javier. And you'll see later on in their application to have him actually recused, towards the end, they start referencing European, human rights law, etc., which I also had to look up. So you can see that they're painting that picture, but I also think that they're doing it so that people within the organization who do read it will see that persecution. We're the only religion that did this. You're being procedurally unfair to us. You're damaging your inquiry's a joke, for lack of a better example, because of this reason and that reason and this reason. There's a couple of things I really want to point out. Sorry, this has really gotten under my craw. Mark, you made the point about providing evidence to the Australian Royal Commission through Angus Stewart, which is the correct procedural process. There's absolutely nothing wrong with what you did, as you well know. And as there is no problem with providing, anybody can provide information to the IICSA solicitor. And, the thing that I found a little bit ironic about that particular point was that when CCJW wanted to make representation in respect of this particular issue, they wrote to Professor J. And that procedurally is incorrect, and they were picked up by it, and they should have referenced the solicitor acting for. So, in effect, I feel like they're accusing Ivor Frank of being in cahoots with other persons directly, and yet they've gone and done exactly what they're
the same. It's a very good point.
But the other point that I wanted to bring out about the particular, if you look at question 8, I've gone through, this was my process. I'm going through reading the letter and I'm like, boring. And so when I got to point F, I'm like, and
all right, yeah,
that's the highlighted one. Firstly, I wrote literally, and I was like, what has that got to do with the price of eggs in China? Like, honestly, who cares? How is that particular point relevant to that whole section? Anyway, I'm pondering. And if I could just trouble you, Danny, to roll back to 8, where it says at the beginning, like the first, it says, prior to making his live stream allegations, Mr. Frank and the Inquiry were aware, or should have been aware, that the allegations were false. So the way I interpret this, if you read between the lines and very carefully, that the allegations was false, and then bringing Lloyd into it down an F, it says on 4 Feb, CC applied to Inquiry to remove Lloyd Evans. So to me, my opinion is that they're inferring that Lloyd has provided Mr. Frank with the evidence. That
makes sense.
And that it's false, and that Lloyd's allegations of this, video are false, and therefore that's why Lloyd should have been removed. And it's Lloyd's fault that this is why we're in the situation we're in. That's my opinion. But I also just want to point out, in this letter, live stream is mentioned 12 times, damage is mentioned 5 times, damage is getting bigger, and Lloyd, you're mentioned 4 times. Congratulations. Thank
you. I await my award and certificate, but I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. They are basically railroading over Ivor Frank's explanation and saying, we're ignoring that. We know, or we believe fervently, that you got your information from, among others, Lloyd Evans, and you should have known better because we warned the Inquiry that he is a spewer of hate speech. So you should have known better, Ivor Frank.
But the reality of the matter is, the fact of the matter is let's just make a hypothetical situation. I absolutely know this is not how it happened, but imagine if you did give in your evidence to IICSA that letter that video, for whatever reason, in your evidence you felt that was relevant to the IICSA inquiry, and you gave it. At that point, they would have had the opportunity to see the video. They would know it's not a false allegation. That video exists. The gentleman said it. So they're wanting to just completely set aside and paint that picture that you just made up this fantastic story. You made it up. You said it. It's all your fault. The fact of the matter is, the video exists. That was what was said. I don't understand.
It's not an argument about the contents of the video, right? Like it has like their argument is not whether any of that was true or it happened. It's simply what they believe the source of it was. And
no, I actually tend not to agree with you there, Javier. It says Mr. Frank, when prior to making his live stream allegation, Mr. Frank and the Inquiry were aware, or should have been aware, that the allegation was false. So they're actually denying. They're saying that they don't destroy records, that they haven't destroyed records, and that it wasn't said, that's not what they do. So they're saying that the allegations are false. But there is a video that says that they are required to demolish, in accordance with their procedure, they are required to either archive or destroy documents when they're no longer required. But that's what Mr. Frank asked.
Right, and that was what I like. So what I was trying to say is that what they're arguing is they're making arguments to get Frank recuse, but they don't seem to be making arguments about whether or not the contents of the video are factual. Like
they're like, telling. That's right.
They seem to be more concerned what they perceive to be the source of the videos.
Yeah. I think we're all saying the same thing.
Right? So two things are happening here. That they're basically talking over IICSA in two ways. First of all, they're talking over IICSA by saying there were accusations. There were no accusations. Because I think it's important that we differentiate between reality and Watchtower's reality. So in reality, there were no accusations. But here you see here, prior to making his live stream allegation. So there's the one breakdown of kind of reality for Watchtower. And then second of all, as Kim points out, or argued very well, they're also talking over IICSA by saying, we believe it was Lloyd Evans, and therefore he is relevant to all of this. And then my name gets dragged into it so that I can then start chasing IICSA, which I have started doing, to say, well, I can confirm I have the material I have the letter that was sent to IICSA on the 4th of February, accusing me of hate speech and asking me to be removed as a core participant. And I have the 8-page dossier of allegations against me. I'm just banned from describing them in any way, shape, or form because of a procedural issue, because technically they are covered by the confidentiality undertaking that I signed with IICSA. And my lawyer and I are just trying to thrash out, because it's a no-brainer. I should be able to defend myself. I have been publicly maligned as spewing hate speech, and it would be some thanks by IICSA if I go into this whole thing with a spotless reputation when it comes to everything, including hate speech, and then I exit IICSA with this hanging over me. I should be able to answer it now that it's come to light. And it didn't. The point is, it didn't need to come to light. If Watchtower had had some kind of grasp on reality, and were able to, in a very civil and professional way, take IICSA's responses at face value. But because they're paranoid and because they're delusional, they're not going to do that.
Yeah, and you can't even discuss you have 8 pages that they've revealed that Watchtower has written about you, including statements to do with hate speech. You can't even talk about that 8-page letter with us, with your own team. Maybe in the future that'll change if they release this, but right now you can't talk to us about it. But we, as your team, we're affected too. Not only is it very personal to you, Lloyd, you're reading that in a public document that they're claiming you've written hate speech. Who knows what that is? But the rest of us are reading this too as part of your team. And it's upsetting to all of us that you would be accused of hate speech when in fact we work with you every day, and we've produced all these videos with you along with your hundreds of other videos you've produced, documentaries. Where is the hate speech? There is no hate speech. You don't engage in hate speech, and that's why people review what we write on survey and what you do in your videos and leave the organization because of rational reasons, not out of emotion against the organization. So anyway, I just look. I'm sorry that you've been put through this. It's not fair.
I'll tell you what I'm looking forward to is hopefully it happens, but when we can dissect that dossier publicly, because we know there's going to be just tons of double speak and lies and fallacies, and we're going to find basically everything they're accusing in these requests that they're making to IICSA that they're doing it themselves. So that let them keep shooting themselves in the foot. I welcome it. So
I have a question for the team.
Final comment about that. The live, when we talk about, they're not wanting to face reality, I think the key thing is these 2 letters together, 22 times they mention live stream. And I think that's a massive tell. The fact is they're hurt. because of the they know that people will see this, and they know that people will ask questions, that people will find it very, very confronting. And I'm not just talking about ex-JWs in the general public, I'm talking about people who are Jehovah's Witnesses. And I think that their incessant need to say live stream is a massive, massive tell as to their motivation for why they did this. Because Lloyd, you're on YouTube, live streams, YouTube damage.
It's all about controlling information, isn't it? And yeah, I absolutely cannot wait to dissect their dossier in detail. I've already started assembling what my arguments are. It's just that, again, I literally can't even indicate in any way, shape, or form what's in it. That's how far-reaching the confidentiality thing is. And look, in a way, here's how I see it. I have a moral and ethical right to clear my name, and I am going to clear my name one way or the other, with or without permission from anyone, because I have been maligned and it's my right to clear my name. It's just that I've put so much work into IICSA. Richard's put a lot of work into IICSA on my behalf. So if there's a way of doing this properly and by the book, so that I'm not having to in any way jeopardize the work that I've already put in for IICSA, and it can all proceed smoothly, I'm happy to wait and try and get things done kind of by the book, because we've got more than enough to go on just with what we're reviewing now. So that's kind of my take on things.
Yeah. Well, I have a question for the panel, just a matter of discussion, because I think that it was very short, that the whole exchange with Mr. Frank, or between Mr. Frank and Paul Gillies, but he has some questions that I wasn't expecting. We were all kind of in shock, but one of the questions was, who was your predecessor? And if you look at the facial expressions and the body language of Paul Gillies, it really seemed to me like he was angry that they would even ask such a question, as if to say, that's irrelevant. And he had to think about it. And then he said, I think David Simonian. And David Simonian is a guy who has been quoted multiple times in relation to CSA. In fact, during the Peter Smith articles from, I think, 2002, who did the big expose on CSA, David Simonian actually was interviewed by journalist Peter Smith, and they actually got one of Watchtower's lawyers interviewed, and it was a big CSA expose. But I found it very interesting that they went back to asking him who his predecessor was, and he had to think about it. He didn't want to answer it. But the question to the panel is this, and to you, Lloyd, especially, do you really think that here is the head of the public relations for the entire organization of Jehovah's Witnesses? Now, this is a guy, like I've got a letter here. Paul Gillies, wrote a letter to Stephen Bates. Now, we don't have time to talk about this, but, there was a whole United Nations fiasco where for 9 years, Jehovah's Witnesses were associated as an NGO member of the United Nations. And so there was this expose by journalist Stephen Bates, and it went back and forth between him and Paul Gillies. And Paul Gillies was basically defending the organization, saying, hey, we're not, we only were part of the United Nations because of getting access to the library. Stephen Bates proved that was patently false, absolutely false. And he had, lots to back that up. But, here's an example of a letter Paul Gillies wrote. And this was 2001. So, he was at the time the press officer for Jehovah's Witnesses in Britain. Now he's the press officer for the entire organization. He's sort of like the Sean Spicer, or the press person, the PR, the front man for the entire organization. So my question is, does he not know that these videos were leaked about records management? Because as a PR guy, and I can tell you from my personal experience that, my testimony during the grand jury investigation in Pennsylvania, that they questioned me, or I spoke about this Sean Bartlett. I was questioned in regards to Sean Bartlett and in regards to records management and that whole department. It was very similar questioning to what Mr. Frank asked. Okay, so he's the PR guy for the entire organization. How does he not know or have a prepared answer when the question is put to him about records management? Here's what I would say, and I'd like to hear what you guys, have to say, but if I were Paul Gillies, I would be ready for that question. I wouldn't complain about it and write this 8-page letter against, saying Lloyd Evans is full of hate speech. I would have said, okay, yes, we have a records management department. Some of our departments, like real estate in New York, we have to keep records for 7 years. After that, we can destroy them. And it's just as simple as that. Some records, we can't keep hundreds of millions of pages of records, like real estate records by law. After 7 years in New York, we can destroy them. It's a very simple answer he could have given. He could have said, it has nothing to do with CSA. It's just our policy of destroying documents that are completely not needed after a certain period of time. Why doesn't he have that in his mind as a prepared response when this guy, Mr. Frank, asked him that question?
Well, you'd have to ask him, but if I had to guess, I would say that probably the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. And the amount of... because the amount of information that you have will depend on what department you're in. He's not in the muckraking department. He's in the PR department. He has, like, in his mind, a set number of different arguments that he needs to answer. He's not necessarily going to know about all the leaks and all the problems that the legal department's having with apostates. He's the head of PR. He's not the head of legal.
I think, okay, he's the head of PR. I think his job is to get ahead of these controversies and these issues, right? And then be able to spin it. You used Sean Spicer. I think that's a perfect example of the kind of crappy work that guy probably has to do. But if they can put together a dossier of the things you said on your channel or whatever, he has to know about these leaks. And what I think it boils down to is that at that moment, I think Watchtower understands that leaked video does nothing to help them back up the claim that they care about protecting children, right? It does nothing.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves too much, because I think Mark's onto something when he says that there was an answer that they could have given that would have denuded the need for all of this outrage and hysteria and making things 10 times worse. We're going to see clips from the video later that I've prepared. The video is incriminating. Don't get me wrong. It raises a lot of questions. However, there is plausible deniability with that video. Here's what Paul Gillies could have said. He could have said, yes, I'm aware of the video. Here's a copy of it. You will find if you watch it that not only does it not mention destroying child sex abuse documents once, it also makes several references to holding on to documents if there is a legal requirement to do so. Oh, and by the way, when Sean Bartlett talks about Satan, he is making his own personal. He is commenting on it based on his own personal opinions and not necessarily expressing the opinions of Jehovah's Witnesses. That's all he had to say in his statement, and none of this would have been necessary. But because they are such a narcissistic organization, because they can't stand feeling as though they're not in control of every last thing, this has flared up into this huge controversy where they're chasing IICSA over questions they don't like.
So was that your submission for the position of new PR guy for what?
Watchtower, you know how to reach me. Let me come over and do your PR for you.
I mean that would have. They should be writing this down, so I hope they're watching.
Well, they follow our Twitter, so it's likely and we do know that they to some degree follow our YouTube, because we were live streaming the Gilead graduation and that got shut off within less than 90 minutes. So. Anywho,
let's try and get to the end of these documents and then sorry,
can I just comment about that last item that we guys were talking about? I think you've been out of the organization too long. The reason why they won't acknowledge that they, what you guys are saying about, PR, excuse me, hang on a sec. What you're saying about PR and what they could have said and all of that sort of stuff is fine. And I agree with all of that. My thinking in respect of why they've carried on the way they have about the video is because they don't want a Jehovah's Witness to see the inquiry, to see that there's a video and go, oh, what video? Hang on a minute. Are there leaked videos? I'm going to find out, curiosity, and then all of a sudden they'll be live streaming, finding out about Lloyd Evans, John Cedars, XJWs, other videos, truth. Some of the truth that, some of the leaked videos that I've seen have some truth about the truth in there. And I don't think that they want, so they have no choice but to sell it as false allegation, to sell it as this. It didn't happen. I mean, he's denied, that in his later statement, which we'll see, he's denied anything about the video. He doesn't want to validate that video because it could potentially cause witnesses to go looking.
They don't even acknowledge it in the letters, though. They refer to it as allegedly filmed in 2017, and it's just that weird legal speak that's very vague. Yeah. Obviously, the video exists and it's out there, but
they brought in the reluctant apostate who he's made that false allegation. This is apostate lies. This video doesn't, brothers and sisters, this video doesn't exist. Don't go and look. Don't the language, the live stream, the serious nature. They're painting this video. I think they're more concerned about the damage the video will do to JWs predominantly.
You're worried that it will send. It's not necessarily the video itself; it's the rabbit hole that it will send witnesses down.
Exactly
is that what
right.
you're saying? Okay.
Yeah, that video is Alice, and she's going to take them down the rabbit hole.
Okay, that's a fair argument. Let's get. I'm determined to get to the end of these documents. So, paragraph 16 again refers to Richard Scorer, the legal representative for Lloyd Evans, referring to Mr. Frank's live stream questions and his concluding submissions as proof the inquiry had uncovered evidence that CCJW had destroyed records related to allegations of child sex abuse. They go one step further. Mm-hmm. Again, here's what Richard Scorer said. Try to find in there any mention at all of documents related to child sex abuse. It's just not there. They are literally putting words in the mouth of one of the leading abuse lawyers in the UK.
They're serving themselves up on a platter by making that statement.
Exactly. Paragraph 17, question number 3, noted that internet blogs and posts were boasting. Isn't it interesting how when they're warning Jehovah's Witnesses about outside information, they're saying don't take at face value the first thing you read on an internet blog, especially if it's been posted by apostates. You can't believe what they say. They're lying. And here they have constructed an entire legal strategy, an entire crusade based on one tweet that they claim boasts that myself, Mark and Jason had provided the inquiry with the material, even though they've had a perfectly logical explanation from IICSA as to how Ivor Frank came across the material. Later on,
it's not just Mark O'Donnell; it's Mark J. O'Donnell.
Mark J. O'Donnell. Sorry, yeah.
I appreciate the accuracy.
I think the middle initial stand for Jehovah?
I didn't want to reveal that today, but you've outed me. And yeah, my parents were devout, and that's going to go around the internet.
Oh, Jesus.
We're all about transparency here, Mark.
Mark Jesus O'Donnell. Yeah.
But you make a good point, Lloyd, because it's almost like in that one paragraph where they name the three of us, it's sort of like a public declaration. If any witnesses come across that, here's the three guys you definitely want to avoid.
We saw it on the internet, so it must be true. Yet, and I'm just scrolling down again, yet none of those religions, this is where they're trying to argue that they're being picked on. None of the religions were publicly criticized by Mr. Frank or the inquiry during the live stream proceedings for their failure to provide disclosure. Again, without wanting to labor on this point, Mr. Frank did not allege anything. He did not make any criticisms. He literally just asked some questions.
Lloyd, just on that particular note, just if I can just make a comment. Can you just roll back?
Yeah.
so they, in effect, actually what they're trying to do is control the change of the rhetoric. They're now there talking about, under, Rule 9, we provided statistics in relation to child sexual abuse because we were required to. Nobody else did that, but Mr. Frank didn't pick up and criticize another religion for not disclosing under Rule 9. So they're actually trying to deflect the responsibility, and why Mr. Frank is such a bad person and why he is biased. They're setting up the bias argument. Does that make sense what I just said?
Yeah.
They're moving on like, oh, well,
he's treating us differently to how he's treating everyone else.
That's the bias.
The implication of Mr. Frank's live stream questioning of Mr. Gillies was that the Britain branch office was complicit in a criminal offence to destroy records pertaining to allegations of child sexual abuse. Again, we're going to watch the exchange. No such language was used. More stuff about implications. They repeat the nonsense about Richard Scorer, the legal representative for Jehovah's Witnesses, claiming that Mr. Frank's questioning proved the inquiry had discovered evidence that Jehovah's Witnesses had destroyed records pertaining to allegations of child sexual abuse. They just make up a reality and they run with it. They just keep repeating it over and over again, regardless of whether it's just totally not true. They repeat this rhetoric about containing the damage. This is damage that needs to be contained. And then I think Kim alluded to the fact that they then start spouting legal precedents related to how religious minorities are to be treated. The state is under a positive duty that it must not portray adherents of a minority religion in an unfavorable light in public opinion as a dubious sect, or amplify prejudices against the adherents of such, often small religious communities. So yeah, this is where it starts going on about human rights and trying to lay the precedent for IICSA to recuse Ivor Frank on the basis of bias.
And I find this particular point particularly, I know you and I, Lloyd, have had a difference of opinion in respect of IICSA, and that's fine, like we're entitled. And I won't speak about your opinion, but I've read articles and I've seen, generally speaking, people being quite critical of IICSA and, the softball questions and the lack of effectiveness that the inquiry has had. And particularly the way that Mr. Gillies was treated, and he was given very, very more than fair opportunity. I can't think of the QC's name, but Fiona Scolding. She was. Yeah. I thought she was extremely friendly with him. I thought she was extremely gentle. She wasn't argumentative or difficult. She allowed him to go on and give a mini public talk, 9 minutes and 27 seconds worth. She was very, very patient with him. So for them to turn around and say that, that they're, a minority religion and that the, under the human rights, they don't have the ability to, what's the exact word, to be in a dominant position. I absolutely just think that's offensive. They were in the dominant position. They were given all of the questions. They were given opportunities, even after they felt like there was prejudicial, procedural bias or whatever. They were given the opportunity to provide statements. A statement from a gentleman who wasn't even involved with the IICSA inquiry. They were more than fair, and yet now they're going to say that they were being dominant. This is too far for me. Sorry. Thank you.
Fair point.
So I think paragraph 23 that you have up there is significant because Jehovah's Witnesses are very much, they've always said that it's all about Jehovah's good name. We wouldn't want to besmirch Jehovah's name and cast negativity towards God and his organization. But paragraph 23 really focuses the pinpoint of what they're worried about. And it seems like they're just getting too petty and they're not thinking spiritually as they like to think, but now they're thinking legally and about reputations of men, of imperfect men. So from a Jehovah's Witness standpoint, it's like the Shakespearean play that, the lady doth protest too much. They are protesting things. Like in this paragraph, it says here that they've profoundly damaged the good reputation of Mr. Gillies. Well, I'm not so sure he has a good reputation, but Mr. Gillies, Mr. Bartlett, CCJW, and individual elders of Jehovah's Witnesses, and have violated the prohibition on discrimination and bias. And it all sounds such legalistic talk when they're supposed to be a spiritual organization that leaves the matter in Jehovah's hands. Why can't they do that?
Well, I think there's two sides to this. On the one hand, they like to stand still and see the salvation of Jehovah. But on the other hand, you sometimes hear them talking about giving Jehovah something to bless. So they've got to kind of go so far so that Jehovah can pick up the rest and run with it and get them the outcome that they're looking for. So they're quite happy to come out.
I'm with Mark on that one, and plus you triggered me.
He had me at Shakespeare.
Apologies to all 560 who are currently triggered by my scriptural quotation.
We don't accept your apology.
Good, we can laugh about it.
That was hate speech, Lloyd. That was terrible.
Well, I am known for it.
Actually, someone said on Reddit the other day that your next book shouldn't be The Reluctant Apostate, it should be The Official Apostate.
The Official Apostate, yeah.
Anyway, the point that I wanted to make was about that question 23 paragraph, which Mark quite rightly has said is extremely important. Just like the Australian Royal Commission, where our favourite friend, Mr. Jackson, got up and said, it'd be presumptive to say so. We all know what that statement was about. That shocked me like you wouldn't understand. But also, their attitude in respect of this particular matter. The real issue is that one of the issues is that Satan is coming after us. That's embarrassing to them. And so Satan is coming after us. Is that something that they teach? Yes, it is. Are the governing body God's one true link to the organisation? I can't remember what it's saying, but you know what I mean. The answer is yes. So if they are fundamental beliefs that the Jehovah's Witnesses have, and they talk about bringing, glory to Jehovah's name as their most important thing, they had two very, very large platforms to stand up and defend their faith and defend what they believe and defend, from the highest levels, might I add, to defend, what they teach and what they tell their children from the platform every week about, making classrooms and schoolyards their own personal territory, etc., and up from through the ranks. But yet when it comes time, they use theocratic rubbish, warfare, lies, and they will not defend their position. So Paul Gillies could have also taken the option to give a witness, like he preaches to everybody else to do, to go ahead and say, yes, Satan is coming after us. And that's what it says in the video, because he is coming after us, and here's why he's coming after us, and this is what we believe. But he took the chicken option out, and he has not he's missed that opportunity to make a name for Jehovah.
Would you say that they seem to be more concerned about, because I agree with your rabbit hole theory, that they're afraid people will go down this rabbit hole with this information out there, but do you think that they feel maybe they're more susceptible to that now because we're still kind of in a shutdown, people are home, their meetings are they're doing Zoom meetings, nobody's seeing each other in person, they're not participating in the door-to-door campaigns, like all the stuff that basically kept people busy is not doing so anymore, and so people are more susceptible to going down those rabbit holes? Like, you think they're aware of that?
Absolutely. Like if you look at, I'm Australian, obviously everybody knows that, and I didn't know the Australian. I was still a Jehovah's Witness when the Australian Royal Commission happened. So, I was still working back in those days. So I did not know the Australian Royal Commission happened until years later. When I left the organisation, it was 2018, somewhere around there, before I knew. So, our lives as Jehovah's Witnesses were very, very busy. And if you work and you go to meetings and you do this and out in field service and whatever else you've got to do, you don't have time to be investigating. IICSA happened at the height of where everybody was at home, nobody's allowed to go out, nobody's allowed to socialize, most people work from home, people have got a lot of spare time. So I'll just have a look at this IICSA thing. What's this about? And then all of a sudden it's starting to introduce apostate content, which is not. It's fact, but it's an introduction to Alice, if I can say.
Although, when you, just to kind of counter the rabbit hole argument, when you look at the views on the IICSA live stream, there aren't that many. We're only talking in the region of 200-300 views for each of the videos. So
I think
they're
more
concerned.
Sorry, Mark.
About the media. I think they're more concerned about the press that's getting a hold of that and then is redistributing it just the way that the Philadelphia Inquirer covered.
I know, but when you think about the Australian Royal Commission, you're thinking about following along on the live stream and that kind of thing. The live stream stats are going to show up on the YouTube channel, and I've checked, and it's only like 200 or 300 views per live stream.
But I think that you'll find that there are a lot of people who were watching it live at the time. The people have shared links, and I think that if they share links that it doesn't necessarily include in the numbers. I'm not an expert in IT, everyone knows that. And I think that a lot of people have seen it that we don't realize, have seen it or have seen it in part or have heard, seen Reddit, asked questions. I think it has generated a lot of interest. If you look at the Reddit stats, I think there was a 500-person increase. And I'm not saying it's all because of IICSA. That's not factually correct. It can't be. But I think that as those people wake up, the other people are going to go, oh, did you hear about the Australian Royal Commission? Oh, did you hear about IICSA? Oh, here's this. Oh, what's that? And then so on. So it doesn't necessarily have to show up in the stats. I think all it has to do is just give one little seed and off it'll go.
Okay, fair enough. And here we have finally, after the Rule 9 request and on the same day that the application to recuse Ivor Frank is filed, you finally have the fourth statement from Paul Gillies giving his official response to the question about the records management. It's quite interesting when you scroll down to paragraph 2. I attended a records management presentation at the Britain branch office sometime in 2017. I do not recall the date of the presentation, did not take notes of the presentation, and do not have any other record of the presentation. He's got a very short memory, hasn't he? What's the point of going to presentations if you can't remember them a couple of years later?
You remember, Paul. Paul.
I do not recall the presenter using the words mentioned by Mr. Frank. I understand that the same presentation was held later that same week with members of other departments, which I did not attend. I have inquired of the Britain branch office, and they inform me that they do not have any recording of the presentation. Apparently the recording that is clips on the Philadelphia Inquirer website and that we have a 57-minute copy of isn't in existence on the hard drives of the Britain branch office. Believe that if you want to, is all I'm going to say.
Yeah, if you want to talk about destruction of documents and videos, one of two things happened there. One of two things, right? Either he is telling the truth, which means they've destroyed or just deleted it off of the Britain servers, right? Or it's the other.
What do you think, Javier?
I don't understand the legal stuff, but if it existed on servers in Britain, would the inquiry have the authority to subpoena something like that? Right? And if they do, then he's covering his bases. He's saying they don't exist in Britain because they're probably backed up in some server in the US, which IICSA would not have the authority to subpoena.
That's a point, actually. Yeah, I've inquired of the Britain branch office. They do not have any record. It could be that it's on Hub, and Hub is hosted in America, so they can watch this if they want to. It's just not physically on. That could be what he's meaning.
I think it's very important to note that Mr. Frank asked some very simple questions, and Gillies, in what he responded, both verbally and in this letter, did not deny that anything in that video was apostate, lies, or false. So there's nothing in here to say that was a manipulated video, that it's false, nothing of that nature. So we have to conclude by that he is not discussing it because it's real. And by the way, there's more than one records management video. And
so yeah, that there are. Anyway,
I won't go into that, but there's more than one.
So anyway, the full document is available to read, but the point is that Paul Gillies denies that there is a recording, at least at the Britain branch office. He doesn't make any comment at all on whether a recording exists elsewhere, bearing in mind it's a big old organisation and it could be, for example, at World Headquarters. He doesn't make any comment whatsoever on whether a recording exists at all anywhere. And then he repeats in the final paragraph there about this being an impression left by Mr. Frank's questioning that the Britain branch has destroyed records relating to allegations of child sex abuse. Well, we're now almost at the end of the actual document, so we can watch Ivor Frank's questioning and ascertain for ourselves that there were no allegations. I do just quickly want to show the notice of determination document that was issued only as recently as the 21st of September. So in other words, nearly a month after they'd received this request to recuse Ivor Frank. So they sat on this for a while, IICSA. And mostly it's just a case of repeating the points from all of the correspondence. So you see there, Alexis, I think it's Alexis J who wrote this, repeating that apparently Mr. Frank had implied that Mr. Bartlett had counselled a criminal offence. So she repeats what the accusations are and doesn't have a great deal to say on the fact that they're total nonsense. The CCJW requested that the video footage of the exchange between Mr. Frank and Mr. Gillies not be disseminated more widely than it already has, and that there is no further dissemination of that exchange. And then right at the end, here it mentions that he does not recall the date of the presentation. This is referring to Gillies' statement, which we've just looked at. Did not take notes and does not have any other record of the presentation. Mr. Gillies states that he has inquired of the Britain branch office, which has informed him that it does not have a recording of the presentation. And reference there to the use of the word ambush, about an allegation of criminal offence. Again, not commenting on the fact that this is all just total made-up nonsense, just repeating what the substance of the claims are. At my request, the investigation team examined documents obtained from CCJW in response to the 2016 Rule 9 request, which numbered over 3,500. 31 documents were identified as relevant to the scope of this investigation. I've highlighted this just to kind of flag the fact that I've been jumping up and down quite a bit about the need for IICSA to go after the database, go after at least the records of accusations in the same way that happened in Australia. I think it's a travesty that they haven't done that yet. And here they're saying that they actually did receive over 3,500 documents from CCJW. They don't specify that this was the database or these do include the actual accusations. They then say this was whittled down to 31 that were relevant. Some of the other core participants in this investigation asked the inquiry to disclose all the documentation that the CCJW had provided to the inquiry. In fact, I think it was both other core participants. In particular, its records for all internal reports of sexual abuse. The inquiry concluded that any such wider disclosure was not relevant and went beyond that requested of other organisations in this investigation, to which I would reply, other organisations in this investigation have apologised to victims, namely the United Reformed Church and the Methodist Church. Other organisations haven't tried to pass the buck and claim they don't have a responsibility to protect children because they don't have any arrangements that separate children from their parents. And other organisations in the investigation do not have a documented record of keeping these allegations and saying that they won't necessarily pass them on to the authorities. So I don't buy this whole, oh, well, if we do it with Watchtower, we've got to do it with everyone. No, not all organizations are the same, and not all organizations are coming to IICSA with the same track record, with the same policies, and with the same attitude. And then at the end, in the concluding remarks, Alexis J says, accordingly, I declined a request for Mr. Frank to recuse himself from this investigation on the grounds that it is neither necessary nor appropriate for him to do so. I also declined to remove from the website the video in which questions were asked of Mr. Gillies by Mr. Frank, but the website will have the response of Mr. Gillies, the relevant correspondence, and this decision appended thereto to provide the full context. And again, within that relevant correspondence, you have incidentally this outrageous claim that I am a perpetrator of hate speech. So we now have to embark on another crusade or another dispute to get to the bottom of these accusations. So ironically, by accusing Ivor Frank of making false accusations, Watchtower has put itself in a position where it can be exposed as making false accusations, ironically.
I think that the organization is displaying an incredibly thin skin by all of this. The 8 pages about you, these letters protesting Mr. Frank's involvement, trying to recuse him. I mean, why protest so much? It makes the story so much bigger that they're protesting than if they hadn't said anything at all. And look, when you're the PR representative in an organization, I mentioned Sean Spicer before, and we have all these other people who, you know, in the U.S. government are PR people. They seem to have a short lifespan. Gillies has been around for a while. He is defending an organization that has many accusations of terrible things against them, from, causing tens of thousands of deaths due to their blood policy. He's got to defend that, and he has. He's been on videos in the UK and other places in which he's defended Watchtower's blood policy. You know, that's you got to have a thick skin to do that. He's been involved in Russia, I think, as far as some comments that he's made about, the persecution in Russia. Now CSA, child sexual abuse, and they have actually taken him from as PR person in the UK, and I think head of the legal department. So, he's got to know a lot as head of the legal department over there and a PR guy, and brought him to the headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses in New York. And, he's just got to expect to be criticized for his role in defending an organization that many call a cult. And many would be correct in saying that because of the fact that they baptize these young people so young and they can't get out of it. And they've lost their friends and family for life, and just a host of other reasons. And he's got to defend all of that. It's just unbelievable to me that he can't have a thicker skin about this and just let this roll off their back. But now they're calling attention to it. And it's really bad for Watchtower. They're protesting too much.
And the call to, in all of the documents, the gall that they have to demand apologies for what they perceive as slights. And like you said, Lloyd, these other organizations have already apologized to the survivors, and they've refused to do so. But they so easily demand it in these documents as if they're entitled to one. That's disturbing to me.
Let me just paint a picture for you. Imagine what you've just said there, Javier. Imagine someone in Watchtower's legal department watching this video and watching you say that and pausing it, and every few seconds writing down verbatim what you've said to produce a transcript that can then be used in a dossier to prove that what you're saying is hate speech or whatever. I'm just trying to paint a picture of what's happening behind the scenes. We're barely scratching the surface of the paranoia of this organization.
The upside to what you just said is that I can also imagine Tony Morris watching himself in the bottle game video and just throwing a big old tantrum. That makes me feel better. So, let me imagine that for a little bit.
It really does seem like a kind of a rebuttal or response to your rebuttals, Lloyd, because, you spend a great deal of time in criticizing the organization's videos, JW Broadcasting and the governing body and the crazy things they say. And you're sitting there documenting and pausing and doing all of this work, which, by the way, has been, very, very helpful to a lot of people. You don't have a lot of former members saying, "Oh, that didn't help me at all."
I'll say
The
this
opposite.
to Mark, since we're talking about this right now, and I know, Mark, you're really big about accuracy, and so that's why it's important. It's vitally important that when we joke around sometimes and we crack jokes, and that's all in good fun. But when we're reporting or we're talking or we're trying to expose this stuff, that we be as accurate as possible. Because if Watchtower is watching, they're going to use any inconsistency against you, and it may not, it may not be something that surfaces on their literature or their JW broadcast, but it could be on the big stage, in an inquiry, in a court case, when someone's giving testimony. This is where they would take these opportunities to try to discredit someone, to try to paint someone as a spewer of hate speech, when it matters, in these scenarios. And so I know, like Mark and you two, you guys are very, very careful about being accurate and trying to get all the facts and journalistic principles and things like that. So
Yeah.
I like to encourage that, and I respect that very much. But now we can see, it's a big game. Like, it's a big stage sometimes, and so we have to protect that.
Micah Sunkovic seems to be suggesting an alternative title for today's live stream, Streisand Effect. Thank you very much, Micah, for your super chat. And thanks also to Jenny McCann, Vincent DePorter, James Cameron, and Julie V for your very kind support of the channel through super chats. That's very much appreciated. What we'll do now, if it's okay with you, Mark, is just show, I just for the sake of completeness, and perhaps before we go into that video footage, because you have the screen share, I think, prepared, just so we can take a look at Ivor Frank's questioning and see whether it squares up to the way Watchtower characterizes it. Perhaps just before we look at that, am I okay asking the panel, how are you for time? Because we've already been talking for quite some time, and I don't want to interfere with any arrangements that you may have.
I should be good for now.
I'm good.
Okay.
It's an important topic.
Sure. So maybe if we can look at those videos, Mark.
Okay, so Lloyd, you put together this clip here. So I think you're gonna. Do you want to play the whole thing straight through, or
no? We'll first play Ivor Frank's questioning, and then we'll play. I've put together a montage of highlights from the records management video.
All right. Well, you'll guide me through this because I've got the professor, I think, up on the screen first. Let me just run into a screen share here and see if we can select the right screen. And I got to choose the application window. Okay, I think this is the right one. Now, the second thing is we got to get the audio right. So I don't know if this is going to play.
Did you check the thing where it says audio? There's a little checkbox, which is a nightmare to remember. Checking.
Yeah, let me sure. Let me double check that.
Yeah.
Let's see. There's a box that says, "Don't show these tips again." Let's see. Here we go, Lloyd. Share audio. Thank you for that very much.
Okay.
And let me do a share, and let me get back to that window. All right.
I think you might be able to maximize the screen just to make it a bit cleaner.
Okay. Don't know if it's going to let me do that.
Okay, if it doesn't, that's no big deal.
Well, right now it's on maximize.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
On so my end,
in that case, can you just hit play? Yeah, we're not hearing audio there.
All right, so let me see if we can get. Right. Let's get everything turned up.
There isn't an audio option at my end. Did you definitely click the
I did.
checkbox? Okay.
Indeed, I did. So check a few options here.
There we are.
Yes. And the post is Director of the Office of Public Information of the World Headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses. Yes. That's based in New York. Yes. Before you, who was your predecessor in that post? Mr. David Simonian. Do you also have a post of the records manager overseer based in your office or elsewhere? That's not my position, no. Do you know of someone who holds that position? Are you talking about the world headquarters? Whether it's the world headquarters or anyone else?
Yeah, it's saying
do you know
the
of
sound's a
anyone
bit
who
too
holds
quiet
that?
there, Mark. I think
Okay.
we might have to abandon ship unless there's something you can tweak.
Well, yeah. So I think what we could do is let me just back this up, and I think we can actually run it directly through our microphone here.
Okay.
So let's. Give me a second there.
And the post is Director of the Office of Public Information.
I'm going to stop the share and restart this.
I did actually include this footage in my last video. Here's what I'm thinking. I want this to stick. I want there to be a permanent record of all of this, and I want there to be like a one-stop resource for people who are investigating the Ivor Frank, because obviously so many claims were made in the documents that we've just been reviewing about what was said and the fact that there were allegations of criminal conduct. And I want future people who, maybe years from now, who are researching this, who are stumbling on this channel, to actually have everything in one place so that they can see, okay, he wasn't making allegations of criminal conduct.
All right, then let's see if we can do it without the internal audio. All right.
The joys of live streaming.
First of all,
That's much
That's
louder.
good.
right,
Yeah.
you were appointed to your current post in 2018. Yes. And the post is Director of the Office of Public Information of the World Headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses. Yes. That's based in New York, I think. Yes. Before you, who was your predecessor in that post? Mr. David Simonian. Do you also have a post of the records manager overseer based in your office or elsewhere? That's not my position, no. Do you know of someone who holds that position? Are you talking about the world headquarters? Whether it's the world headquarters or anyone else, do you know of anyone who occupies the post of records manager overseer? Well, we have records management guidelines, and each department will oversee its records management. Do you know a person called Sean Bartlett as a records management overseer? Yes, I do. Did he come to give a seminar to elders in England in 2017? Yes, he did. Did you attend that? I think I did. I can't recall it specifically. You might recall it if you remember the content of the seminar. Can you remember what the purpose of the seminar was? To help us to make sure that our record keeping was up to date with legislation, and that we weren't keeping unnecessary documents. Not keeping unnecessary documents. Do you mean that he advised you to get rid of some documents? Well, of course, at that time, and even now, we have data protection matters, so we have to make sure that documents adhere to data protection issues. So yes, he would advise along those lines.
My next question is, do you have a data retention policy that you have published?
We have a data retention policy. Have we published it? I don't know.
In any event, you were at the seminar in 2017 where Sean Bartlett, among other things, advised you how to keep and how to get rid of documents.
Yes.
Did he, in the course of that seminar, tell you that the reason for getting rid of documents was because Satan was coming after you? Satan in the form of a legal process.
Okay. His comments, as I say, were directed with regard to data protection issues, as I recall. I don't remember exactly what he said on the subject. I don't remember any comments about Satan particularly.
Do you know whether there is a record anywhere of that seminar, of what was said?
I'd have to find out for you.
Do that and please let us know. Thank you very much.
Okay, so if you could pause it there, Mark. Maybe it's just me, panel, but I don't recall seeing anywhere in that questioning any allegations made by Ivor Frank. It looked to me like it was just questions.
Correct.
I agree with that.
Please tell me I'm not going insane.
No, I get the sense that because it was reminiscent of in the Australia Royal Commission, the Australian one, when Angus took Jackson through the line of questioning, that he was basically trying to establish that the efforts of the commission were in good faith. That was what he was trying to get Jackson to accept. I think this was like the beginning of that, and he was trying to go down that route, maybe. But I don't. He definitely was not making any accusations, and I think if anyone perceives it as making an accusation, is because they're aware of the background and the backstory of it. That there is a video, that it was leaked, and that it's something that they were already concerned about, and maybe it did catch him off guard that this line of questioning happened.
Even the most scathing parts. Heather Rance is here saying he made no accusations and gave him the opportunities to provide accurate data. Even the most troubling or awkward moments in that exchange were framed as questions. Here's a question that I'm asking you, and I'm giving you the opportunity to tell me something different. I can remember when I was giving oral evidence, there were one or two questions that were asked of me by Fiona Scolding that were framed in such a way as might piss me off, But that was my job to explain why the kind of supposedly leading question I was being asked was going on the wrong track. And a similar thing is happening here. There's no bias whatsoever. It's just I'm giving you an opportunity to tell me something different, but here's the question,
And I think it was clever that Mr. Frank, did that, because one of the techniques that attorneys will use in civil and criminal cases is to ask questions that they already know the answer to. And in fact, most attorneys would tell you that they never ask a question that they don't already know the answer to. They don't go in there unprepared. They already know the answer. What they're trying to do is to see if they can flush out the truth, to see if they can make a person uncomfortable, which is very revealing. I think Mr. Frank was, look, he's trying to get to the bottom of what Watchtower is doing in terms of their records keeping with regard to CSA or anything, but particularly with CSA. So he's going to ask questions that are questions that he already knew the answer to because he had personally researched it. So,
or sometimes just to get them on the record, right? Just to get something on the record, they'll ask a question.
he wanted to know if this was a real, this 2017 video was real. He wanted an answer to that. And, you know, he obviously made Gillies very uncomfortable. And that part is very revealing. And I think it's important, that part of transparency, to, you know, for the public to see that he was uncomfortable in that line of questioning.
So what we have now...
Yeah, I think it also tests the evidence as well.
Ken. Yeah.
I was just going to say what it does, it tests the evidence. So, you know, he knew about the video. So he knew in that regard, but he didn't know how it fitted in or whether or not it was relevant. And I think that he was trying to test the evidence to see whether or not it was worth pursuing, or whether or not it was just, you know, he wanted to answer the question in his own mind, in my opinion.
Okay. So what we have now, it seems we've temporarily lost Javier's video. We're going to pursue Watchtower. There he is. I was about to send some elders after you to find out why your video had been turned off. Not following proper Zoom protocols there, Javier. So what we have now is a compilation. Obviously, the records management video is 57 minutes long. I'm not going to show the whole thing, but what I am going to show you is a few clips. Now, these clips are not just the incriminating parts, but also, for want of a better word, the exonerating parts, because there are two parts where Watchtower can point to it, as I said earlier, and say, here it's saying you don't get rid of records if they're required legally. So it is embarrassing, it is incriminating, but there are also some things that Watchtower could have said about this video where they had plausible deniability, and we're going to see that. So if you could hit play, please, Mark.
The direction that we've received is that for records, we want to follow the theocratic direction unless there's a legal requirement that asks us to keep records longer than what the theocratic direction is. We always want to take the longer one. So the question is, why has this come up? Why is it that we have records management now? We've been functioning as an organization for years. Well, we know that the scene of this world is changing, and we know Satan's coming after us, and he's going to go for us legally. We can see by the way things are shaping up. So the organization has said, we've run into difficulties in the past because of the records we have. So the coordinators committee said, we want a systematic way to handle records in all branches. And then, so there are times when we need records in order to prove things. So what our oversight has determined is how we're going to handle records, which ones we need to keep for providing this type of proof, and which records we want to go away quickly. So really, they've helped us to understand that we don't have to make the decisions anymore. It's already been predetermined for us and by the organization. And we're going to handle it the same way at all the different branches. But a minimum, once a year, we review records and we do destruction. Now, they may decide to do it more often. You can do it up to as much as once a month. But whatever direction they give us, that's fine. We'll apply that as time comes. And then, so some records go into that archive we talked about, which is generally just a very small percentage of our records. And then the rest of them, they get destroyed at the prescribed time frame. Like most departments, you get the questions, you go through, you create a draft, and you think it looks really good, you pass it by, or someone in your department passes it by you as the overseer, and you look at it and say, no, change this, change that. Well, you do a few drafts, and if you're like Justin and I, that goes around quite a few times until we look at all those that were not approved, all these drafts, and we get rid of all drafts. We no longer keep drafts. So once we've finalized our document, we clean out all drafts. And the reason is because there's many comments that are sometimes made on drafts. Those are the ones that get us in trouble. Because when we comment, we tend to be a little more relaxed and we just type things and, well, we'll leave it at that. We just get rid of them. Okay. So what we ask the legal department to do is when they review these, they will look and they would see in there, oh, your description includes hot work permits or some nature like that. They will look up the legal requirements and they'll write the citation in there. And then they'll come back and say, well, according to the country here, we need to keep those for 10 years or whatever the number is. So then we will modify that because we have the theocratic direction, but if there's a legal requirement to keep it longer, we adjust it. So now sometimes we think, well, handwritten note, how important can that be? Well, we found out they're very important. just a few years, not a few years, well, it's quite a few years ago now. We used to deal with a company. We bought a particular product from them. We hadn't dealt with them in 20 years. That company got into litigation. So that company, they, in their records, said they dealt with Watchtower. Now, this was in the United States, so right away they come to Watchtower, which is Bethel. That's how they know us in New York City. So they come here and ask us, do we have anything in our records? Now, if we do, then we're connected to their litigation. That's how it works. But if we don't, then the legal world says, well, we have in no way can prove that you were ever dealing with them. They just say that. So they came to Bethel and they checked all the records and they couldn't find anything, but it was determined it would be appropriate to meet with some of those that were there at the time. They asked a few different ones. No, nobody had any records of it. They asked one brother and he said, oh, yes, I do. And he was in his top drawer, he pulled out and he had a handwritten note. So that handwritten note tied us back to litigation and cost us a few $100,000. So are handwritten notes just as important? Yes, they are. So we want to be very careful and cautious how we handle our records, even if we think they're insignificant. The difficulty is that's happened more than once. So that's why we have this systematic program that we're putting into play.
And that's the video. So there's a few interesting things there, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. But here's my take home from it. Again, it's incriminating. It's embarrassing. It's shady. Okay? So it's talking there about systematic destruction of records on at least an annual basis. It is talking about retaining certain records if there is a legal requirement to retain them. But when you preface that consideration with the consideration that Satan's coming after us, we need to protect the organization from Satan, and actually we don't want any incriminating documents that could lead to the society having to pay out money, i.e. in child sex abuse lawsuits. And when you also consider that part where he said the records that get archived are, quote, a very small percentage. Well, you would think that if we're talking about criminal evidence, it's a very small percentage that doesn't get destroyed. You'd want to keep hold of everything, wouldn't you, really? So there were a few things that would be very, very concerning to someone attuned to the issues of child sex abuse who watched the whole video through, and I've just given you a few clips there. On the other hand, if Watchtower wasn't so reactionary and wasn't so narcissistic, they could have, in my view, constructed sort of an argument that might have placated IICSA so that this whole thing didn't become such a huge issue. That's my point on that.
So there were...
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, no, go ahead, Javier.
No, okay, so I was trying to see if I could rationalize this distinction, because he talks about the destruction of records and the retention of records. And from what I understand, like, corporations have the obligation to keep, for example, their tax records for a certain amount of time, right? That's very, very different from having retaining a record that might incriminate you or affect you legally in some case. And then the example that he used was this handwritten note that cost us the organization several $100,000 in legal fees or whatever. But it ignores the fact that if it had not been for that handwritten note, they could legally say that they had no affiliation with this company. So it indicates to me that they would prefer to destroy a record that would prevent them from having any kind of legal trouble.
That's exactly what he's saying.
If they're willing to do that for something that might be trivial and maybe financial or something like that, I gotta imagine that they've done this with something to protect themselves from child sexual abuse lawsuits. It's just it's hard not to come to that conclusion, you know?
Yeah, you said the golden word there when you described, his experience as being one that is protecting the money. several $100,000. I think in another version of this same video, he actually says $200,000. This story, I'm not sure I buy this story. I'm sure there's some elements of truth to it, but I think the way that he crafted this story and gave this minimum amount of information. In one of his other videos, he says that the branch or the coordinators committee approved of him giving this experience. So he worded it a little bit differently in this one, I think. But it was the same story, and it's been repeated over and over again by him, and his assistant is Justin. And by the way, Justin is this, his second in command that also gives the records management speech in other branches and has been on video doing this. But it's all about the money, not just the protection of Jehovah's name, but it's this $200,000 that they lost. And by the way, they were civilly liable for something. So they did something wrong.
Either you're liable or you're not.
Yes.
And if you're liable, pony up.
You don't pay $200,000 unless you did something wrong and you're civilly liable.
And their regret is that they couldn't get away with it because of this handwritten note. That says a lot to me. But
so I'd like to read something very briefly that just I want people to understand this, and I hope that somebody from Watchtower or a team of people from Watchtower is reading this, because this is your organization, and maybe
you don't have to hope, Mark. I think of all the videos on my channel, at this precise moment in time in the history of my activism, you can bet any amount that this is going to be being watched by at least one member of the CCJW legal department, because they're going to be watching me like a hawk at the moment to see how I react.
All of us watching all of it.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Let's also hope. I hope Richard Scorer is watching.
So, hello CCJW. Hope you're all doing well.
Yes.
Hope the coffee making facilities are to your liking at the moment.
Brumley and Paul Gillies and Shady Brady. Shane Brady. Excuse me.
So Mark, when you go out, when you go out today to the market or whatever, just look out for any service cars or minivans following you around the neighborhood.
Yeah, I've got a Kevlar vest and a helmet. Yeah, I've got that. So look,
he's got a Kevlar fanny pack. Yeah,
gotta protect the vitals.
That mysterious, super clean minivan with Watchtower magazines on the windshield
is not what you think it is. It's not what you think. But look, so there's an article in the 1993 Watchtower, and let's see. The title is, you guys can look this up. It's called "Rahab Declared Righteous by Works of Faith." So I just want to read this little paragraph in here. That's the end of the article, because this is the summation of Watchtower's policy on whether or not they want to be honest about things like that, whether they're going to destroy handwritten notes and not tell the lawyers that they did do business with this company. So here's what the paragraph says. It talks about Rahab. We know Rahab was the woman who hid the spies, right? And she lied about it. And they're saying that she did a good thing because she was protecting Jehovah's interest. The paragraph says, what about Rahab's misleading words to pursuers of the spies? God approved of her course. She took a risk in order to protect his servants, giving evidence of her faith. While malicious lying is wrong in Jehovah's eyes, a person is not obligated to divulge truthful information to people who are not entitled to it. Even Jesus Christ did not give full details or direct answers when doing so could have brought unnecessary harm. And it quotes scriptures. Evidently, Rahab's course of misdirecting the enemy officers must be viewed in that light. This is one of the most important watchtowers, I think, that have ever explained their policy of misdirection, lying to authorities, not giving the information to people that they believe are not entitled to it. Goes back to that whole 1 Corinthians 6 thing, where they believe that the anointed ones are higher than the angels and that they judge things higher than any human court system on the face of the earth. Here's the courts, here's Jehovah and the anointed and the elders and the governing body up here. So that's the whole policy. This is justified lying. And I think if Mr. Frank were to see this, or Richard Scorer, or any of these other people, they know that they cannot trust anything that comes from the Jehovah's Witness organization, because they've publicly said that when it comes to protecting Jehovah, they will lie. The end.
Yeah, I did actually include a section on theocratic warfare in my evidence to IICSA, and links will be in the description to all four, I think it's 4 documents. But we've come to that point in the show where we're gradually getting there to the finish line, and we've come to that point in the show where we can take a look at the news.
Okay, thanks for that great.
The music makes me want to get like glow sticks, you know.
Oh man, what can I say? The news is brought to you by our good friend and sponsor, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of both Pennsylvania and New York, serving up somewhat truthful information for I don't know how long. Anyway, that's my attempt at humor. We're going to keep this quick because we've been going a while here, and there's some stories out there. Don't have time to get into all of it. I'll just mention a couple of the stories. So there's a story out of Belgium that's fairly important, and our very good friend and Lloyd's very good friend Patrick Heck's been working on this along with some others for a number of years now, and it has to do with shunning and the effect that it has on members of the Jehovah's Witnesses who are disfellowshipped and shunned or disassociate due to their choice and get shunned. So there's articles, I think, in the press about it. There's actually over on Avoid JW, there's a nice little summary of what's going on. So I'll just read this. The Jehovah's Witnesses face trial for hate crimes on February 16th, 2021. So it says, for a period of 5 years, the court investigated complaints from ex-members of the Jehovah's Witnesses. They testified about how they were rejected by the organization and became completely isolated socially. The Ghent prosecutor's office already sued the Jehovah's Witnesses in June, but the case was then postponed. On Tuesday, the case against the Jehovah's Witnesses was reopened. The deadline for the conclusion has been set, and pleadings will take place on February 16th, 2021. I think this is a translated article here. A dozen people already presented themselves as disadvantaged parties. According to the defense of the ex-members, this number will only increase. 4 changes have been placed before the nonprofit religious organization. First and foremost, inciting discrimination based on religious beliefs against a person and against a group. In addition, inciting hatred or violence toward a person and towards a group. So, you guys might want to comment on this.
Do I have this right, Mark, that the organization that's accusing me of hate crime
that was my next point
is being litigated against on the basis of hate crime themselves? Isn't that interesting?
You would be correct, Lloyd, in that assessment.
Isn't that interesting?
And that's actual hate, because that's where you have people that are young, as I mentioned earlier, children that get baptized at 9, 10, 12, 16, and then they decide later, I want to live a different lifestyle. I was a child. I didn't know any better. And then they lose all their friends. They don't even have to be disfellowshipped. They lose all their family, friends. Then if they do disassociate, done. No one can ever speak to them again. Mom, dad, sister, brother, except at maybe funerals. You might get a glance. It's really sad. But look, I want to just give a shout out to Patrick Heck and his family for doing this for so long, for working in Belgium with this. This is a criminal prosecution. And I know there's a lot of people that have come forward to testify, to say that, yes, they've been, this has devastated their life. And religions and nonprofit organizations should not be permitted to have this negative effect on a person's life. This is the opposite of faith and religion, at least what most people interpret faith and religion to be. It is what they believe, criminal behavior. And,
I know Patrick's been working on this for years. I think I even did a video interview with him. Literally, it would have been around, I don't know, 2014 or 2015, where I sat down with his lawyer and we were talking about this case. And this is how long they've been working on it, So they've been, by the sounds of things, just kind of engineering and orchestrating things so that everything's kind of all nicely put together. And it will be very interesting to see how CCJW, who frankly we're seeing are completely incompetent when it comes to making legal arguments, at least on the basis of this Ivor Frank fiasco. It'll be interesting to see how they fare up under that kind of scrutiny, because obviously different countries have different rules when it comes to hate speech, and I'm pretty sure the rules in Belgium don't bode well for an organisation like Jehovah's Witnesses. So that will be interesting to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think so. And we've, I think a lot of change will come out of European countries, because they take some of these issues, since they are smaller countries and they're a little bit more autonomous, and they don't have the United States Constitution as it's written over here, which has all these protections for religion. Things happen a little quickly, I think, over in Europe and, in Norway and Sweden and in Belgium and countries like that, where they take GDPR and human rights and these issues very seriously. And look, it's causing the Jehovah's Witnesses to be really backed into a corner, and they're sort of like a frightened dog, and they're lashing out, and they're going up against journalists and bloggers and people like us that report on these issues. And it's like,
so I hope Shady Brady likes Belgian chocolates and Belgian beer. Why wouldn't he? Because he's needed in that country. Yeah.
Indeed he is. So we'll be reporting more on that, obviously, as time goes on. We're going to be hearing a lot about Belgium. So stay tuned. The other story I thought I might mention, and I'm sure I'm going to miss some, but there's an interesting story that's developing that I'm working on over here in the United States. And it's called the Farmers to Families program. So I'll just give you a little quick summary, and then we can kind of move on from this. But what's interesting is that so the United States Department of Agriculture has initiated a program back in the spring of 2020 following the concerns related to COVID-19. So we had all these farmers across the U.S. that were really unable to sell the food to restaurants, because so many of the restaurants were forced to close because of state laws, because of coronavirus. So what happened was the USDA authorized the payment of hundreds of millions, and I think over into the billions, payments made to farmers, and has awarded large contracts also to distributors to manage the dispersal of these food boxes, which might have 40, 50, 60 pounds of fresh fruit and meat and other vegetables. So this is a great thing in that, they're basically, helping the farmers out, and they're giving these distribution contracts to nonprofit organizations, which also include religious organizations. So those distributors are then in turn partnering with churches and other nonprofits like the Jehovah's Witnesses to distribute these food boxes. And again, it includes Jehovah's Witnesses. So what the witnesses have done is saying, oh, we're going to take advantage of this program. And so they're using their disaster relief committees across the U.S. And there's at least 10 or 12 committees that the U.S. is broken up into. And they're managing the distribution underneath of whoever gets the contract. And there's a number of, upper level nonprofits that have gotten the contracts for millions of dollars from the government. And then they are coordinating with Jehovah's Witnesses and others to distribute the food boxes. But what's interesting is that we've received leaked letters and other information from private meetings that have been held with disaster relief committees, that the witnesses are telling their members who are getting these food boxes not to speak to the press or to anyone about this program. In other words, they're being extremely non-transparent about it, and that raises a great deal of red flags. And journalists are now investigating whether or not the witnesses and other organizations could be mismanaging the food box program. And one reason is that we're getting a lot of stories from people that have reached out to me. They've posted multiple streams on Reddit, a post on Reddit about the fact that Jehovah's Witnesses members have been pressured into taking these food boxes when they don't even need them. And I find that fascinating because there's a lot of people that are in need, that are maybe homeless or they're in a bad situation, don't have a lot of money, big families that have, 8 or 10 kids, or less, but they need the food. But the the distribution channels of Jehovah's Witnesses through the disaster relief committees, they're getting a hold of these distributors and saying, we'll distribute food. And they're putting these food boxes in assembly halls all over the US. And they've gotten actually glutted with food. And so they're telling the local congregation elders to go to all the publishers. And at first they polled them and said, we need to know how many food boxes you guys need. But they were polling congregations in affluent areas and saying, how many do you need? And they were getting, like my mom's congregation got, I think just the last shipment alone was 42 boxes of food. Some of these boxes of food are being charged upwards of $100 to the government. And they're being given to people that don't need it. And we have ample evidence of this. So I'm not just saying this, because if the food was going, it's a great program. And if the food were actually going to poor witnesses in need that are hungry, by all means, Jehovah's Witnesses distribute this food. But the corruption that's occurring from what we're gathering here is the fact that they are pressuring individual witnesses who don't need the food to take these boxes, whereas other people actually need them. And then we have letters like this one here from one of the disaster relief committees. And here's what it says. It's halfway down the letter. This is dated May 20th. So this is during the first round of the program. And it talks about this great program, praising and honoring our great God, Jehovah. And then it goes on to say, in an effort not to bring undesirable attention to our efforts, there are a few things that we would like to request that you keep in mind. Number one, please keep this gift of food confidential. Number two, do not post pictures of the provisions on any electronic network. Number three, avoid making statements to the media or any other internet contact regarding what you have received. Number four, follow the principle Jesus stated at Matthew 10, 16, and 17 to be cautious as serpents and yet innocent as doves. Our ability to adhere to these things could have an impact on future donations that we may receive. On the back side of the cover letter here, there are food safety reminders that we hope will be helpful to you. And I won't say which disaster relief committee this is from, because this is, JW survey investigation, and I'm not going to give away all that information at this point. We're not saying that Watchtower is getting money. We're not saying that at this point. So I have filed a FOIA request to the U.S. government. I've spoken to the USDA. At this point, we're not saying they're getting money to distribute food, but what we are saying is that they're misusing this program, and they're, number one, telling their publishers to not talk about it. Do not talk to the media. You can't even take a picture of a food box and say, this is a loving provision that the government provided me. Because the boxes have some of the boxes have pictures of Trump on it, our president. And
well, that wouldn't be a loving provision then, would it?
So, say what you will, because I'm not making a political statement here by any means, and I appreciate the fact that Trump authorized this USDA to do this. It's a great program. It really is, but it's being misused. Food's being misappropriated, and the Jehovah's Witnesses are right there in the middle of it. And they're telling their people, do not talk about it. Don't take pictures of it. Don't put it on the media. Why can't they talk about it? Why can't they say, I got this great box of food. The brothers delivered it to me, but it came from, the assembly hall, in Crownsville, Maryland, or in Buckingham, Pennsylvania, which is, by the way, two of the distribution points. And there's many, many. They're putting this in assembly halls. So
that was going to be my question to you, Mark, and you answered it already. But I was going to ask you if there was any chance that because they're distributing the food, and I know you said that companies bid on these contracts to distribute the food, that if there was any chance, because Watchtower has trucks and they distribute literature and all that stuff, that because they have these abilities that they would have bid and gotten some money for it. But I understand, fine, there's no evidence of that. That's fine. But it seems, somebody mentioned the Streisand effect earlier, and it just seems to me that it jumps out because we've talked about this. There's no such thing as a Watchtower charity that feeds people or anything like that. But it's so weird to me that they would take something charitable and just by telling people don't post pictures, don't talk to the press. They take something that might be positive and might, charity and helping people is but they make it look so nefarious by doing that. And it's almost like if they hadn't done that, we wouldn't nobody would even be looking in that direction. But that's weird to me, man.
Why the need for secrecy? Go ahead, Kim. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I also think it potentially, I think, Mark, you hinted on it, those who hide nothing have nothing to hide. It's not necessarily that they're doing anything wrong. It's just, it's through that, that sort of undercurrent attitude or that undercurrent behavior, people are questioning it. And I guess for me, I think the program is fantastic, actually. I sort of knew a little bit about it, but not anywhere the details. So thank you, Mark, for providing me with some more detail, because I found it very interesting. In Australia, we have a lot of problems with primary produce going to waste and just going straight to landfill because of those things that we just haven't had the process to be able to organise to get it to people like you guys have, which is fantastic. To me, I see a little bit in of Jehovah's Witnesses doing the me, the squirrel thing. We have to, that's all for us, let's not share. And I really find that just to be a really poor Christian attitude. It really makes me sad to think that what would Jesus say if that were the case? And the other thing, that I remember about is this, there's more joy in giving than the receiving. My question that, is it possible, you guys might know, do you think it's possible that Watchtower don't want it to be broadcast, and they don't, because it would seem that the government is then providing for them as opposed to Jehovah providing?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
That's one theory that's been
goes against their narrative, doesn't it? Of Satan's system of things looking out for if they were to be open about Satan's system of things looking out for Jehovah's people, Well,
yeah, that's exactly right, Lloyd. And that's a point that I've been making when I've been talking to a lot of people about this, including journalists I'm working with on this story. So if you read the beginning part of this letter, this was the earlier in this year, and there's been lots of letters about this program from the various zones in disaster relief. So the letter says, well, we feel that this gift has come from his generous hand. For every good gift and every perfect present is from above. We reflect the psalmist's sentiments when he prayed to Jehovah. You open your hand and satisfy the need for every living thing. Please take a moment to thank Jehovah. We hope you enjoy what is included in this box, and may it sustain you in the days to come. We pray that you will be able to put it to good use, and if not, feel free to pass it on to someone who can benefit. And then it gives all those, do not do this, do not do that. So what I want to emphasize here with this particular letter, this letter was to all recipients of food supplies in this particular zone. So this means, and this was addressed to brothers and sisters. So what I confirmed with in this particular region is that, and it's the, one of the largest states in the US, and hint, Javier. So what I discovered here was that nothing in this letter said anything about how this was a loving provision of the United States government, which, by the way, of course, Jehovah's going to be destroying in a week or two. I think, Armageddon's going to wipe out. Oh, but by the way, they're going to feed you first before you get destroyed. So we're going to do this. But look, it's everything here is praise Jehovah. I've also got internal meeting minutes from where they meet with elders, and I'm not going to say the region in this case, but they have made it very clear not to tell the witnesses that this is a government program. Although in some cases they can't avoid it because there are markings on the box that say either
Watchtower's put a picture of Donald Trump on the side of this box. Why is Jehovah's organization doing that? Yeah.
So
the angels know who to destroy. This guy.
So anyway, maybe we'll get some comments and we'll talk about it more. There will be an article, but I'm still waiting for the results of a FOIA request. And so what happens is these companies, for example, Cisco is one food distribution company. They got a very large contract. They're one of many. Cisco gets a contract. They are then partnering with Jehovah's Witnesses as one of their distributors. And then so you've got this connection between the company that's getting the money and then the company that's distributing the food. Now, I did find evidence that some of the lower level distributors are getting paid a certain dollar amount per box.
If there's smoke, there's fire. That's all I'm saying.
Right, exactly. So no proof that the witnesses have taken any money for this whatsoever. But if I do find that proof, believe me, and Paul Gillies, you might be having to respond to this. If you're watching, you better start writing.
A whole new slew of hate hate speech accusations coming your way.
And he also cannot claim that he wasn't given advance notice of the question either. So
Exactly.
Procedural fairness.
Oh, actually, speak directly to him because I'm sure he's watching.
Yeah. Hi, Paul.
Just Paul, just letting you know that was constituted as prior notice. So just so there's no question about procedural fairness, Mark has let you know. If you weren't paying attention, just rewind and listen to it again. That's all.
Record.
Anywho, what else do you have for us, Mark?
I'm going to leave it there. We've been going for a couple hours now, I think. So I know you guys want to do some concluding comments probably and maybe talk. So,
well, can I just briefly mention this? Because I worry that...
Oh, my apologies, Lloyd. I didn't mention your article, and I feel like an idiot. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
That is the story.
Yeah, I feel because we were originally...
I'm fired.
I bet you if it was a Philly Inquirer article, we'd be all over it.
COVID Fade would never have done that.
Because we were originally planning on doing this Watchtower in Focus episode on this story, because it's a big story in its own right. You know, how often do you get an organization like the National Secular Society paying attention to what's going on with Jehovah's Witnesses to the point where they don't just allow someone like me to write a lengthy blog article explaining why HLCs have no place in hospital wards influencing patient care. They also arrange for media exposure in the Mirror newspaper, in a national newspaper, and conduct their own investigation, so that they contact all of the different NHS trusts, because in the UK it's obviously it's obviously public health care, and all of the hospitals are organised. All the hospitals and healthcare facilities are organised into what are known as NHS trusts. And it's the NHS trusts who have their policies when it comes to things like how to deal with Jehovah's Witness patients. The NSS goes and writes to all of them and says, what do you know about this? What do you know about this issue? What's your policy for dealing with HLCs? And they find out as a result of that investigation that some NHS trusts have been duped into enshrining in their policies language that just holds the door open for HLCs, and in some cases even recommends them to patients to interject, to interfere in patient care. The NSS found all this out on our behalf, and they also wrote to an MP and said this isn't acceptable. And so I was so thrilled about it, and it took me so long to write the blog article. I will put a link in the description in which I mention Eloise Dupuis, which is the standout story highlighting exactly what HLCs are about and the way that they bully and intimidate and interfere and basically hurry people down the road to martyrdom. So I was so thrilled with the NSS. In fact, I've actually become a member now. I just think that's the organisation, for me at least at the moment, that's really holding religious fundamentalist groups to account at the moment. So yeah, I was really thrilled about it. And obviously the Ivor Frank thing blew up, and that ended up becoming our main story. But I just wanted to kind of flag this issue. And we will obviously put links in the description below if you want to find out more.
Well, thanks for doing that, Lloyd. I know you put a lot of work into your article or blog or whatever they call it for that, the article on blood. And then you were also interviewed, right? So there really is at least 2 articles that we're dealing with. And these are really critical. We've seen a lot of weird things go on with the HLC and the fact that they, present themselves as an organization that is just there to support the desires of witness patients. But the fact is that the witness patients only abide by this blood policy because it is not an a la carte thing. You can pick and choose, your medical decisions regarding blood with regards to this Jehovah's Witnesses. You cannot take whole blood transfusions, like if you're bleeding out. In the case of Eloise Dupuis, she was bleeding out in childbirth or right after childbirth, and she lost her life, and there was nothing they could do about it except for giving her blood transfusions. She lost her life. If you have leukemia, you need transfusions. You're probably going to die if you're a witness. They can only do so much with these alternative treatments. So the idea is that the HLC says, we support the desires of Jehovah's Witnesses. And they also say that we only come to the hospital if witnesses request it. Well, that's simply not true. They're there in the hospital as soon as anyone notifies them that there's a blood issue with regard to a patient. And, most witnesses will not tell an elder, especially an HLC elder, to get out of the room, and we know, I think your article mentioned, or when they quoted you, Lloyd, that what the consequences of what would happen to a person who accepted blood, and you quoted from the Elder's Manual. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty clear.
Good job on that, Lloyd.
Yeah.
I was happy to see that, because we, a lot of times when we meet up and we talk about this stuff, we focus a lot on the child sexual abuse issue, which is a huge issue and it needs all the attention it can get. But I'm glad that we're seeing some discussion into the blood policy and HLCs, and hopefully this comes about that results in some change. So good job on that, man. I was proud to see that.
There was if I can just comment very briefly about the article, I thought it was extremely balanced, and I can't tell you how proud I was when I read that. I just thought it was fantastically balanced. Unlike what you be accused of on a regular basis, you are very fair. So I just wanted to comment on that. And the point that you made, there was a point in there about, and I'll have to not quote you verbatim because I can't remember, but it was to the effect that if it's a personal issue, if whether you take blood fractions or blood transfusions or not, or what, all of those matters relating to the taking of blood are a personal matter and a personal conscience issue, and that's what Watchtower teach. So your point was, if it's a personal matter, why are there a HLC there telling them what to do? Why not leave it as a personal matter? So I thought that was extremely valid, and I hadn't thought about it before, but really it's a great question that you asked there.
Thank you. And I do just need to credit Mark. Mark does all sorts of research and contacting people and that kind of thing. And the irony with this whole HLC story is that it was prompted by Watchtower. It was prompted by JW.org releasing an organizational updates video which praised the HLC arrangement. And in that video, I talk about this in my Angels of Death video. They had various talking heads, and two of them were doctors, and one of them was, I think, Dr. Jeannie Cullum was the name,
from Canada.
And so they were basically cherry picking, doctors saying things that were sort of remotely could be construed as positive about HLCs. And so Mark did digging on this. And I think I'm okay in saying that you reached out to Dr. Jeannie Callum.
Dr. Jeannie Callum, yes.
And as a result of that conversation, you found out that Dr. Jeannie Callum had co-authored a medical report into the how can I put this? The variety of responses to accepting or refusing blood among Jehovah's Witness patients. And that report proved, for the first time that I'm aware of, that sometimes Jehovah's Witnesses do accept blood, because there was at least one patient out of 25 in the study who accepted packed red blood cells, which is a no-no.
Right.
And there were other products that were accepted by more than one patient. So this was huge. And it was on this basis that I was able to go to the National Secular Society and say, here is proof, categoric proof, that Jehovah's Witnesses, even in a situation where the HLC are present, will sometimes accept blood. So it's not a foregone conclusion. It's not, how can I put it, a semantic argument to say that they shouldn't be there interfering, Because we have categoric evidence that sometimes Jehovah's Witnesses do accept blood.
And I will say this: Dr. Callum allowed me to interview her for as long as I wanted, and she was very gracious with her time. She's an extremely busy doctor. She works at Sunnybrook in Canada, and she's a very nice person. She grants interviews when she has time for it, and she did so with the Jehovah's Witnesses. The reason they got her on video was that a whole bunch of doctors were at a conference, and the witnesses sent their, and this was a long time ago, like 8 or 10 or more years ago. They're just now using these video clips from Dr. Callum and others who were at the conference, and they're cherry picking from those video clips, because Dr. Callum, her whole entire life and work is based upon blood transfusions, upon the proper use of blood. And they basically cherry picked her to say that, well, they're using less blood now. And so therefore the Watchtower is saying, well, less blood is better. We want to manage blood usage. But reality is that she, manages the transfusion of thousands and thousands of patients. And what she did tell me is that, at her hospital, they really don't have many HLC trying to interfere because they don't allow it. Whereas in other hospitals, like in the US, we have in New Jersey, for example, we have a hospital which got, crawling with witness HLC elders. I'm trying to think of the name of it. Everybody knows this hospital, Englewood, New Jersey. So the witnesses have this incredible foothold where, they're trying to do this non-blood medical stuff. The HLC is all over. They certainly will not permit whole blood transfusions, red cells, etc. But they, up in hospitals where they're like in Canada at Sunnybrook, they're much more careful about not letting non-patients interfere with the diagnoses. And so that, or interfere with the treatment. And that has allowed some witnesses to privately say, I'll take blood. And I'm hearing this from other doctors. I've talked to other, anesthesiologists and doctors who treat Jehovah's Witness patients, and they have told me that secretly many do take blood. It shows you that the witnesses want the blood. They want to save their life.
Comment on that.
Go ahead.
So for the doc, without revealing too much, but one of the doctors, a doctor that we interviewed is she's a director for blood, marrow, and transplantation departments in one of the major hospitals, like a huge hospital in the Southern California area.
When you say the doc, you mean the truth about the truth? Yes. Yeah.
And what we got from our conversation with her was one, her team has explicit policies with how they handle Jehovah's Witnesses who will accept blood transfusions, and they also have specific policies for how they deal with HLC, members of the HLC. So this is a thing. I think what we learned from her was that there are a lot more Jehovah's Witnesses that are willing to accept blood transfusions if they can do it safely, according to them, to them, than the organization probably leads on and that we might know of. So yeah, definitely, this is a big deal that this is getting some attention in the press, and I hope to see more of it.
And I just wanted to mention, Mark, because it's a team effort, and I think that this particular story highlights that. It's not just me working away in the bunker and Mark doing his thing in Maryland and Javier working on the documentary and Kim helping us with the legal advice and that kind of thing. Well, it's really teamwork, and what one person does contributes to what the other person does, and we kind of what's the word, jam off each other in that way, and it works really well. So
it's not just one hateful person; it's a whole team of hate.
It's a team of hate.
Yeah, isn't there a room where you conjure your hate speech in the back over there?
That's behind the white door. Yeah.
Okay, I knew it.
So anyway, it's time for concluding comments. So yeah, we've been over a lot. We have looked at multiple legal documents that have been sent by CCJW to IICSA. We've examined IICSA's responses. We've looked at the footage of Ivor Frank's questioning. We've looked at the record management video that was the basis of Ivor Frank's questioning. So at the end of all of that, what do we have to say? Can we have your concluding remarks, Javier?
Sure. I think I say this every time we kind of go over one of these legal exchanges with Watchtower and some institution, but what we see from Watchtower publicly and what we see in their material, their publications, and their broadcasting is one thing, and when you see how they behave in legal proceedings and things like that, it's another thing. And we really are, I say this all the time, we're watching the sausage being made. And so I don't think there's any way you can come out of witnessing this stuff and think that, you know, this is an organization that has the best interests of children and its people at heart. So that's pretty much all I have to say. And then, you know, I already thanked you for your work and that article in HLC, and of course, you know, I always respect what Mark does and Kim and everybody does. So let's keep doing it, because this information needs to get out there. So let's do it.
Thanks. And Kim, what are your thoughts in conclusion?
Well, I'm not going to repeat myself on my opinion about the legal process. I do just want to comment about, I understand that legally Watchtower are entitled to do certain things, but I don't actually think that if they're going to, I do think that if they're going to play ball, so to speak, in a legal world with everybody else, the same way and using the same tactics as everybody else, then they cannot say that they are no part of the world. And I think that they should stop doing that, because I think it's not a Christian attitude. You know, they want to be exemplary, then be exemplary. You know, if you're liable, accept liability, tell the truth, stop using theocratic warfare as a tool, because you're not doing yourself any justice. Look at paragraph 39 of the judgment from Professor J. You know, you're applying, legislation in respect of human rights, and you're utilizing that to make yourself look like you're the victim of all of those sorts of, atrocities that everybody commits against you. Professor J gives you some really good advice in paragraph 39 that those things are not applicable. So, start acting like the Christian organization that you say you are. Finally, I think it's absolutely atrocious that, given all of what we've discovered and discussed in today's discussions and what I just said in respect of being exactly the same as the world, to accuse somebody who cares and who is equally balanced in his view. He's always said that he has respect for Jehovah's Witnesses, that he loves them, and that's why he does what he does, to expose the truth and to get rid of the lies, etc., etc. To accuse someone like that, who gives a lot of his time, and his team, who give a lot of their time, of hate speech, is just, it's a low act. It's a little bit lower than anything I've ever expected that Watchtower would ever do, because Watchtower know, and for anybody that doesn't know, hate speech, in order for anything to be hate speech, apart from the fact that it needs to be factually true, which is, to the best of my understanding, everything that Lloyd has ever said is factually true, or researched, or an opinion, or justified in his opinion. But the underlying, theory of hate speech is incitement. You have to incite to discriminate, to be hostile, to be violent, and all your speech has to, Lloyd has spoken, I don't know about hate, but has spoken out against Kingdom Hall crashing, against, what do you call those things? What happened, the Black Lives Matter rioting and doing all of those sorts of things. Lloyd has spoken out about them, and I just find it absolutely hypocritical and disgraceful that they would make those statements. I think it's just, there's never been any intention, and there never has and never will be any intention to incite violence or anything like that. So I think that Watchtower need to have a really hard look at themselves. I think they've overstepped them up this time really bad.
Thanks so much, Kim. That means a lot, and I really appreciate you bringing your legal knowledge and experience to a very complicated situation. It was quite ominous for me to explain things in my hate speech video, and I said in the video we're going to go into it in more detail in Watchtower in Focus. And I've been banking on my panel for this one, and you in particular with your knowledge. So thank you very much indeed. And we go to Mr. O'Donnell.
Thanks, Lloyd. I will try to keep this brief. I've got two softball games tonight, and we've got to leave in a few minutes. Okay. So we're ending this just in time. But one thing I forgot to mention, and actually, let me jump over to this. One thing I forgot to mention was, give credit where credit is due for people that are on this panel of IICSA. And if you go to the Independent Inquiry Child Sexual Abuse, you can see the various panel members there. Professor J. Ivor Frank, Professor Sir Malcolm Evans, etc. So under Mr. Frank, it says he is a barrister with 4 decades of experience in child protection, human rights, and family law. He was brought up in care himself and is represented in Campaign for Children in Care as a member of the parliamentary groups Looked After Children and Care Leavers and Care Leavers Voice. Ivor has advised the Home Office of the issues of forced marriages and international child abduction. He has served as a trustee of Buttle, which makes grants to vulnerable children and young people in need. He now serves as a trustee of the Rees Foundation, which has similar objectives. This man is a saint. This man is involved in protection of children, and here Watchtower is trying to get him excluded on the false rumor that that yourself is involved in, or myself and Jason Winter involved in allegedly leaking information such as that video to Mr. Frank, who is a panel member. This is utterly ridiculous. They're trying to disqualify the very man that is fully qualified to sit on this panel. That's why he is on this panel. It's just ridiculous that this kind of behavior exists. You've got somebody like Gillies, who's just a PR guy. He has no qualifications whatsoever. He's not like Mr. Frank with all of these legal qualifications and qualifications of helping children. And he himself was a member, he knows what it's like because he lived in care homes, it says. So I don't know. Look, my advice, to Paul, if you're watching, is come on, stop going after guys like this. And stop going after Lloyd Evans and myself and Jason Wynn. I mean, come on, we're trying to help children. We're trying to change laws for the better. We're trying to change policies so that, people will not be, criminalized for leaving the JW organization and shunned, and that their child sexual abuse cases won't be covered up. I mean, come on, we're trying to help people. What you're doing is just, it's destructive, and it only cast negative attention upon yourself when you do that. So, and upon your organization. So I've noticed the organization is just increasingly litigious. We've seen lots of cases over in Europe, especially, where the organization is just chasing down, authors like yourself and our friend in Germany, that wrote Goodbye Jehovah, Misha. They're just trying to sue these people for comments they're making, which are accurate in their books. And, I mean, come on, guys, it's,
what about standing still and seeing the salvation of Jehovah? Yeah.
They're worried about the IICSA investigation, the CSA investigation in Pennsylvania with the grand jury investigation, the Australian Royal Commission, the Brazilian investigation, the Netherlands investigation, and the criminally going after the documents that Watchtower is covering up. Damage control is a priority for them. So please stop protesting what is true. Start helping children go after, bad things in our world. Distribute food to people in need, not just Jehovah's Witnesses that you're foisting these boxes on, but give it to people in need. Give it to homeless shelters. Show yourself to be, an organization of, of true charity. And anyway, so that's what I've got to say. Thanks to Mr. Frank. Thanks to you, Lloyd, for doing, what you've done and putting this together. This might be one of our longest Watchtower in focuses ever, I think. But
an important subject that I wanted to document, and thank you for helping me document it. And I don't want to keep you from your softball. However, just one thing to add on to what you were saying, or to just highlight what you were saying. We joke about Watchtower watching this, and probably they are, but if they are watching, it's not a joke. It's not a case of ha, you're watching us and we've got you and we're trolling you. I echo your sentiments, Mark, that this is first and foremost about protecting children. We're doing this not because we found something that we can pin on our former religion, not because we want to be a thorn in the side of our former religion. It's because we want children protected, because we're seeing the glaringly obvious situation of rampant abuse in the organization, and it can be easily fixed. And it's not going to be fixed if no one identifies the problems and no one speaks out about the problems. That's all this is about. It's not about trying to trip you up. It's not about trying to cause you problems. It's just about trying to protect children. So I thank you. I thank the panel for their help. Go on, Javier.
Can it be a little bit about pissing Anthony Myers off? Just a little bit.
And on that bombshell, thank you so much to my panel. You see, you just ruin it. Thank you to the currently 550, but at one point 586 who are watching along in the live chat. Thank you for all the super chats, including 2 late ones there from Margaret Kelly and Marilla Pink. I really appreciate the support of the channel. But that's all we have for you. Don't forget to subscribe to the John Cedars channel for more such videos. And as always, thank you for watching.
Say